Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the hearing to order. I would like to acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson, this morning. Introducing the panel members, Mr. Jeff Peich to my left, and to his left, Mr. Robert Buss. Representing the city is Arka Dark Hanoff. Close enough. And our recording secretary is Kara Belshell. We'll be hearing an application for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested has been described in each application, and we'll limit discussions to those matters. The statements that the applicant or the assessor make at the hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessment properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it. Along with the city administration, we make our decisions based on the evidence provided at the hearing and issue a written order that will mail to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision in respect to application may be appealed to the Municipal Assessment Board. And if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to application from exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing, I will confirm the matter to be addressed with each applicant following the swear-in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the other applicant may have, and it will be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each party will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket this morning. The session will close after the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. I'll ask our secretary to swear in or affirm the assessor and
Mr. Story.
Do you affirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I affirm.
Thank you. Please state your name.
Sid Story.
Do you swear the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
I think everybody's familiar with the routine, so Mr. Sether, you can take us through number 5, St. Anne's Road, whenever you're ready.
Alright, just one question to the panel. I did prepare additional package as a rebuttal. Do I introduce it now or wait?
Do it, go through the original, and then you can probably take us through the property, and we can be open for questions, and then you can present your rebuttal.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. All right. Subject property with a file number 194288. Roll number 08000440500. Address 5 St. Anne's Road. Property owner is 2727731 Manitoba Limited. 2020 assessment with the reference date as of April 1st, 2018, $638,000. Subject property is a commercial medical office clinic as a parcel use. Now it has 1 building with 6 premises, 1 story, 1980 year build, and 10 year effective age. Wall height 11 feet, zoning C2, land area 5,732 square feet, plan area 3,500 square feet, leasable area 2,936 square feet. There is a recommendation to maintain the 2020 assessed value at $638,000. Page 2 of my report provides aerial view of subject property as a top picture. Oblique image of subject property as a picture number 2, and Google Street View image of subject property as a bottom picture. Okay, so we can skip to page number 4 at this time, and page 4 provides a breakdown on subject property market income, where potential rent is $40,490 with stabilized rent per square foot at $13.79, and a leasable area of 2,936 square feet. That's how $40,490 is calculated. Further down, provides calculation for vacancy loss at 5.5%, expenses at 2%, and show forth rate at 7%. Net operating income, $36,368. Overall capitalization rate, 5.7%. And that arrives at estimated value for subject property at $638,000. Page 5 provides rent comparables, the rate comparables with average of $15.99 per square foot and median of $18 per square foot. The comparables used are property type office, so they're all office buildings, and very close proximity to subject property, with comparable number 2 being next door neighbor at 3 St. Anne's Road. Page 7 provides a breakdown on capitalization rates. Page 8 has some experts of Municipal Assessment Act. Page 9 provides subject properties income and expense report submitted to the city. And yes, further down, page 11 forward with a fresh look. And page 17 just provides a bit of a description of what type of zoning C2 is. Okay. And that's and that's all I have. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry?
That's all I have.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
I thank you. Mr. Story, questions of the assessor?
Yes, if I may. Good morning.
Good morning.
Have you inspected the site?
I have not inspected the site.
Okay. What do you know about the site? Do you know it's a doctor's office?
Well, it can, just give me 1 second here. Well, it has a number of tenants in it. There's a family doctor's office. There's also appears to be an accountant's office.
Yes, yeah, Mr. Blay, yeah.
And the dental office.
And the dental office?
Yeah, looks appears to have a dental office there as well.
And you've got some pictures on page 2 of your brief. And the bottom picture, that's the subject property, and it shows that it's got Mr. Blay as a CA. And where's the entrance? Do you know where the entrance to the medical offices are to get into the building?
Mm. Yeah, I cannot speak to that. I don't know.
Yeah. And you know that on page 2 of your brief, you've got a photograph of the subject, and then immediately to its left, which is going west, that's a law firm that you're using as a comp today, is that correct?
That's one of the comparable.
Yeah, and it's $12 and change for a comp, correct?
Excuse me?
It's $12 and, it's $12.60 or $12.40. Your comp rate
Yes.
is 12. It's number 5, number 3.
It's number 2.
$12.60, yeah, sorry. Small print. Let's just for a moment, we'll just jump, let's jump to page 4. So this is, the rents are model generated. Page 4 of your brief.
Okay, yeah.
They are?
To the best of my knowledge, they are. Yeah.
Okay. And if you look at the list of leasable areas, now you haven't been in the property, so you don't know. These are medical examination rooms. There's a waiting room, and then there's these small breakout rooms you get your doctor's examination. So you've used one of the areas, 7665, is 138 square feet. That's very small, correct?
Yes.
And somehow you've determined there's 1468 is a market rent, or not you, the model is telling us it's 1469, is that correct?
Correct.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And for 212 square feet, the model is telling you it's 1418, correct?
Correct.
And for the next one at $15, it's 106 square feet. Not very many square feet. And your 200 square foot is 1558.
Mm-hmm.
And they're totally model driven. Correct?
Yes.
And let's just go to, I'll just touch on one thing here. On your comp page, on page 5, you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 properties that you've used, correct?
Correct.
And of the 8 properties, 3 of them are single-story offices, similar to the subject, correct?
3 of them are 1 story, yes.
The second, third, and fourth are one-story buildings. Which would be most appropriate, one would presume, as a comp for a single-story building, correct?
Mm.
Well, let's assume I'm correct.
Well,
This time, for just a moment,
I'm,
otherwise I won't be able to ask this next question. Okay, next question is, the next comp you've got is 200 Marion Street, and that's right across from the property we're doing next. And it's $9.28 a square foot. In your opinion, why is that so low? Because I'm suggesting to you that single-story office buildings on St. Anne's, on Marion, on Goulet are usually around $10 a square foot. Why is this lower than that?
well, I'll tell you, if they're around $10 as you are stating, why do we have rents that are higher than that?
Why do that?
Yeah. Why do we have rents that would be
Well,
higher?
well, because you picked them out of massive rent rolls, that's why. This isn't necessarily the real world. And then the next one is 188 Marion Street. And what can you tell us about 188 Marion Street? Have you visited any or all of these comps? Have you inspected them?
No, I have not.
How do you know they're comparable?
Based on the data we have on records, based on type of buildings they are, I'm sure you haven't inspected all of your comparables.
I haven't, yes I have. Haven't, have you looked at the land to building ratio on your comps?
I don't have that information with me right now.
Okay. Do you know what the land to building ratio on the subject is? It's on page 1 of your brief.
1.64.
1.64, okay. Now we're just gonna take a little walk through the questionnaire. You can go to page 9 of your brief. So the people are compliant, they're doctors, and they have no reason to lie to you about anything, so they've provided their information. I said page 9, but I really meant page 10 of your brief. So what you've got is you have Marcel Blais, he's CA, and he's got 290 square feet in this multi-tenanted building, correct?
286.
Pardon me?
286, right? Oh no,
No.
290.
It pays 286,
Oh, yeah.
which works up
Yeah.
to 707 a square foot. Have you calculated that just to see what the actual arm's length
Which
tenant is?
one are you talking about?
Marcel Blais is the chartered accountant in the building.
Okay, so he has 290 square feet, yes.
At 286 a month, he pays triple net, correct? And then Dr. Wong has 200 square feet, and he pays $800 triple net. See that on your questionnaire? Have you got that on page 10 of your brief?
Well, yes, I see that.
Okay, you see it there? So Dr. Wong pays $800 for 200 square feet, but he's one of the owners of the building. And that's in the questionnaire, it's partially owner occupied, it says in the questionnaire. And Dr. Lee is 1,080 square, sorry, 1,080? Oh, I'm sorry, that might be 12. And there's one vacancy, number of designated is 11, for 400 square feet, correct?
Yes.
And one vacancy is, and that works up to about 13% vacant. Okay? And then, cap rate. Do you know what the cap rate was last cycle for this particular property? Is it board decision?
Let me see if I have that information with me.
I can tell you, say that, 7.5%.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, you're aware of that? So the cap rate has gone miraculously, careful cap rate compression, from 7.5 by decision to 5.9, or 5.7%. Have you any explanation for that?
Well, 5.7% is a model-generated capitalization rate,
Okay.
which is in line with everything. And what you have mentioned before, was it like a model-driven rate, that 7.5, or was it board
It was a
decision?
decision by the board. We thought the appropriate rate was 7.75, and they awarded 7.5.
So
And to arrive at an assessment of $406,000. One quick question. For comp at 200 Marion, it's called Healthy Strides. It's part of the prospectus. What can you tell us about that? Healthy Strides is used, that 280 is used in your the next package as well. That's a tenant that's in $9.28 square foot. You know anything about that site?
That property is on Marion. It's one of the larger buildings that has, it's a one-story long building on Marion Street.
And it's multi-tenanted,
Yes.
and it has parking, significant amount of parking at the back. Two layers of parking plus across the back lane. You aware of that?
I cannot comment on the parking.
Can't comment on the parking? Okay, those are my questions.
I thank you. Mr. Peitsch?
I just want to confirm there's no parking on this property?
On the subject property?
Yes.
I'll just double check. Just bear with me. From the pictometry view, it would appear that there is parking in the back for the subject property.
Do you believe there is parking at the back? On
It would appear to have some parking in the back, yes.
on the summary sheet, on page #1, outdoor parking, it says 0. Indoor parking 0. So I'm just trying to understand whether there is or isn't.
Yeah. I guess I don't know the answer.
Okay. And then I'm not sure if the question was answered by you, but the land to building ratio, did you agree to the, what is the land to building ratio? Have you done that?
What we have is 1.64 on it.
That's an agreement? Okay. And then what struck me also is the cap rate. Looks to me like suburban office, 60% of them are between 6.2 and 7.3 on your page 7. Other than model driven, has any additional thought gone into the cap rate?
Well, the thought that it is my understanding that, and I spoke to some of my colleagues about it, that the smaller buildings would have a smaller cap rate versus larger buildings.
Okay.
That's,
Is there anything else?
and perhaps that I cannot say whether that affects the cap rate, but perhaps that this, because this property is primarily a medical office, it also, well, I know that medical office buildings generate higher rent per square foot versus like standard office, but like whether it affects cap rate, I cannot say. So the only.
So I didn't, just go a little bit slower. What did you say, with cap rate, just this? I couldn't hear.
Okay, the smaller buildings would tend to generate
Lower cap rate.
lower cap rates.
Okay, thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Buss?
Thank you. On page 4, where you have your tenant list, you're showing 6 premises, but by the looks of it, the building only has 3 tenants. One of them is the owner and 2
Yes.
other tenants. Would you agree with that?
Building has 3 tenants plus vacant areas. Property owner listed vacant areas as 400 square feet, whether it's 3 offices combined making up 400 square feet, or whether it's 1 office, I cannot tell you exactly.
Because like 106 square feet, that's pretty small.
It's a
For,
room, right? 10 by 10 or something like that.
To be a separate premise, you know, I mean, I could see a doctor having a room that's 10 by 10, but anyway, what does HQ mean in
High quality.
high quality or headquarters? High quality, isn't it?
No, it's not high quality, trust me. I'm under oath.
Do you know what it?
I would assume it's high quality versus standard high quality office, and then you have standard office.
Okay. Would you agree with me, it's probably not high quality, a little space like that?
Well, the 100 square feet is a standard one, the 200 square feet is a HQ. and I cannot comment whether it's high or standard, so I would refrain from commenting one way or the other on this.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Art, I think we'll have Mr. Story do the presentation, and then I think we can do with your rebuttal.
Okay.
Because your rebuttal is probably to do with rents, correct?
My rebuttal,
Or,
well, it's
Okay.
probably rents,
Okay.
yeah, and the property
So-
choice.
so I
yes,
think we'll have
comparables.
Mr. Story, I think we'll have Mr. Story have his presentation, and then you may ask questions along with the panel member. Then you can present your rebuttal.
All right.
Mr. Story, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So if you look at the cover of our brief, this kind of encapsulates who the tenants are. Jason Wong, who's the owner of the building, is a dentist. Marcel Blaze is a chartered accountant. Samuel Lee is a physician, family physician. The entrance to the accounting office, Mr. Blaze, is off of St. Anne's. The entrance to the medical and the dental is off the back lane. You enter in off the back lane. We all know the building's right at the corner of St. Anne's and St. Mary's. It's next door to a building that's recently been refurbished, and it's number 3 St. Anne's Road, and that's in the assessor's comparables at $12.60 a square foot. The assessment is $638,000, and that's up from $406,000 the year before, with essentially the same use, but one less doctor. There were 2 doctors plus Mr. Wong, and they had a vacancy at the reference date. If we go to page 3 of our brief, the model rent for this 2,936 square feet, the assessor's position on the left, is $1,379. The city has used a 5.5% vacancy. We haven't argued that, because historically there's been doctors in these spaces. It's 13-point-something% at the reference date, because 400 feet was vacant. But we accept the 5.5. We would ask that the 5% be reinstated in non-recoverables. I don't know, we'll talk after if you want more, hear more about it. Cap rate of 5.7% seems totally inappropriate for a small building like this. There is some confusion. We've been doing a lot of work with these smaller office buildings, and cap rates, the assessor's correct, cap rates are fairly low on them. It's because they're generally bought for people that are going to use them. You know, tenants that buy them, or people don't, they're not investment grade. People don't go out and buy them to put in their investment portfolios. And they may in fact have lesser cap rates. By that, I'm saying 7% or 7.5%, not 5.7%. That seems to me to be illogical. So we're suggesting that 7.5% is a more appropriate cap rate. That's the cap rate that this board decided upon last year, with that building being fully tenanted, which it isn't today. With respect to the market rents of $11.50, what I did, I'll ask you to pass that up real quick. Just for an example.
Thank you.
That's just taking the assessor's property. 5 of them are 2-stories. Some of the 2 stories have elevators and whatnot, and I don't think they're appropriate. I think these single stories should be the ones. If you take the single story from the assessor's brief, one is the neighbor at 1260. That building has recently been refurbished. It's a law firm now. The other is at 928. We asked about that. That's on Marion Street. We'll be getting to that after this hearing. It's used as a comp on Marion at 928, and 188 Marion at $14. And 188 Marion has a significant amount of parking. So the average is $11.96 and the mean is $12.50. What we're suggesting, based on the way the building is used, it's examination offices. The questions by the panel were very appropriate. It's got a common corridor, it's got a waiting room, and then it's got a series of these small examination rooms. So 1150 we think is appropriate as a market rent. And that would result in an assessment of 378,888, rounded to, let's do 380. If we go to the next page in our brief, we have just the city's workup of how the city arrived at their numbers, and that's reflected in our position as well. We do, we look at some of these as retail, because it's hard to say that these doctor's offices or dentists or whatnot are offices, but, so we looked at what market rents are for retail. They're all over the place in terms of square footage, but I just wanted to give you a feel for what they are. We have a dental office over there, medicine shop, pharmacy at 12. So it's an average of 1148 and 1150. These properties that are in this comparable are superior in terms of condition and age and location than the subject, and they all have parking in the shopping centers. We go to the next page, which is page 7. This is a decision from last year. Let's just see who's on the board. Mr. Larndon, Mr. McPherson, Mr. Upton. And that was a situation where the, I have that now, I have the breakdown. The cap rate is 7.5%. Again, there's no cap rate, there hasn't been cap rate compression from 216, even in the offices, from 216 to 218, so there's no justification for a 5.7 cap. 7.5 should be used again, and that's what we're suggesting. I don't know if we want to talk with the assessor and the board. Do you want to hear any more about non-recoverables? You're familiar, you know our position.
I think we are.
They're attached. Good. And I think that's my brief. Thank you.
I thank you. Questions of the applicant? Okay.
All right, so Mr. Story, just have you inspected the property?
Many times, yes. Well, many, 4, 5, in the last couple of years.
And so you provided some information on comparables, and I'll put some on the rebuttal, but I'll ask you the following question about, let's see. The comparables you have presented as your comparables, none of them are standalone buildings, smaller buildings, correct?
Correct, no, no. Single story as well. No, they're not.
But they're all in the malls, correct?
The which?
In the malls? In
The malls with ample parking, yes. And with front entrances, not back entrance.
Well,
You enter in the front, not the back.
typically you wouldn't have a medical clinic inside the mall.
Typically you don't? Sometimes.
Typically, well, sometimes you do, but typically for a medical clinic is more of a standalone
Yeah,
type of.
this was to give the assessor a feel for the market rents. I'm more concerned about, in terms of the market rent, looking at our rebuttal evidence that the,
Well, and market rents, would you agree that more current rents are better representation of the market rents than
typically they
than
would,
the
and
older
everything
ones?
else being equal, the more current, the more accurate they would be, more reasonable, yeah.
So, and you're aware that, let's say even the rent on, I guess, okay, this should be St. Anne's Road. 3 St. Anne's Road, it's spelled St. Mary's here. 3 St. Anne's Road is, do you know how old that rent is? When it was originally signed?
How old the rent is?
Yeah, when was it
Lease,
originally
you mean?
signed? 3 St.
What's in
Anne's.
your brief? That's your comment.
Okay, but I'm asking you, are you aware how old it is?
How old, when you say how old, you mean how, are you talking about the lease of the building?
The lease.
So you're saying, when did the lease start?
Correct.
Okay, I'll get that out of your brief, just give me 1 second. Do you know when it started?
I do.
Is that a secret?
I just thought.
Okay. Okay, when I look at your brief on your page 5, you've used that comp, it's $12.60, the building's been totally refurbished, it's beautiful. And the start date was 2/13.
Okay.
So when you
So-
ask, is it current, 2/13 is your evidence.
So with that, do you think that more current starting date of a lease is more appropriate?
Do I think, say it again?
Would you think that leases that started more recently would be a more better representation of the market?
More current leases?
Yes.
Yes, but we're accepting yours even though they're older.
But the reason is that within my evidence, do you see there are newer leases that have been presented as an evidence?
Well, there's one newer lease, the 217 lease, for 188 Marion. And you're familiar though that 188 Marion is quite a different building, or are you not? You don't know the building?
And do you agree that 200 Marion is the same building as 188 Marion?
Oh, hang on, do I say that again?
Is 200 Marion same building as 188 Marion?
Yes, it's an address, and it's a building that has back parking, 2 layers of parking, about 37 cars, and then across the back lane, they also have overflow parking.
And
And front entrances,
yeah.
rather.
And the lease for 200 Marion is, do you agree that there's significant difference in the lease price per square foot on the same building, $9.28 and
Well,
$14?
yes, that's your evidence, and I asked you that if you could explain it, you
Yeah,
couldn't because you hadn't inspected it. You're questioning me on your own
Yeah.
evidence.
Okay.
It's supposed to be questions
Okay, sorry.
of the applicant's evidence, not of yours.
Mhm. All right, so on your evidence, you presented evidence in the malls, you used Cineplex as one of the example. You don't really think that Cineplex is a good example of the
No, not at all. Just gave you an idea. It's when you get into these types of buildings, they are somewhere between suburban offices and retail. There might even be a flex warehouse component to this type of property. So we're just giving you a feel for what range of.
Yeah.
If you can go into St. Vital Square for the same rent that we're suggesting for this property, that seems illogical with parking and services and synergies of other tenants. But no, the best comparables are your comparables, and the 3 that are the single tenant buildings, and they have, and we'll get to those 3 as we do the next property.
Would you, I guess, you would agree that single tenant buildings are better? You just stated it because more,
better
even
A better one?
I guess, as you have stated, you do agree that single tenant buildings are better comparables for such a property than the ones in the mall.
Yes, of course, yeah, absolutely.
And probably one of
The ones in the mall are far superior.
I probably wouldn't go calling them a superior, and I'll tell you why. Do you think that mall leases offer more restrictions to the tenants than a single standard building?
This is owner occupied, you know that, it's owner occupied.
Not for
Yes, they would
everybody.
have more, they potentially could have more restrictions, but that's to protect the tenants, all the tenants.
It offers restrictions on the hours of operations. It offers restrictions on a number of things. So they're not super comparable. That's all I have to say. Do you agree with me?
No, I don't agree with you, but we're allowed to disagree. I don't agree, but I get your point,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep. So, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Peich.
Just to confirm, no parking at the back?
Yes, there's some, it's paid, it's a metered, it's a machine, and it belongs, most of it is overflow, pardon me, is behind the building at 3. There's a parking spot behind 3, this is 5, and they can park there.
Does any of that revenue
No,
that
that's not his,
contributed
it goes next door.
goes next door?
Yeah, so technically, well, he has parking, there's probably, some garbage bins back there, there's probably parking for 5 cars, something like that.
Okay, and then your page number 3, just looking at the numbers, it looks to me like you've transposed the expenses that the assessors put forward into your expenses, which I believe marginally inflates the expenses on the subject property.
Are you on page 3 of our brief?
Yes, that's correct.
No, we're accepting, not transposing, we're accepting the assessor's numbers with respect to
But
vacancy.
you're taking 2% of his rent as the expense on the rent for subject property. Is that correct?
We're taking 2% of the effective net income, which is
His effective net income.
his is, what's his math, 78 times 2.
I'm just looking at, from the structural, as an example, 2%. I'm taking 2% of your
Oh, I see.
value.
They shouldn't be the same. Yeah,
They
they're
should not be the same.
You're correct, yeah,
Right.
apologize.
So it would seem to me that the subject property expenses need to be recast with the rent and
Well,
vacancy.
the 2% should be on the 31,907.
Well, it should be 638.14.
Yes, correct. No.
And the same with the others. They all need to be recast.
Yes, okay. Correct. Thank you.
I have no other questions.
I have a question. You've given us a sheet of paper?
Yeah, but I just took it out of the comps, I put the assessor's comps.
Yeah, average 1196 square foot, median 1260,
Yeah,
but yet you're using 1150.
yes, because we think that the comps used are superior to the subject.
Okay.
It's a really interesting building, and I wish the assessor would take the time and inspect them. This is a building you enter through the back lane, you come in the back,
Yeah.
you go down a long corridor to a little waiting room, you sit there, and then the doctor calls you into one of 3 little
Okay,
examination rooms. So it's a unique building, so I think 1150, it's not demised, it's not demisable, I don't think. So I think 1150 is probably generous.
Okay, thank you, that's all my questions.
So, Mr. Story, are you going to adjust your NOI then?
Well,
Or do you just want to leave it with us?
just leave it, maybe you can
All
adjust
right,
it.
all right,
You have better eyes than I.
that's fine.
Okay.
You have some rebuttal information, or do you want, what are you rebutting?
Well, the only rebuttal I provided, and perhaps it's not as relevant at this point as it was before, because Mr. Story agreed that his comparables are all in the malls, and they're not very comparable to such a property. And just pictures of my comparables, and
Do you want our handout out, or? you
No,
want-
obviously, if
Okay.
shopping centers would
Okay,
have positive and negative effects, they would have, the assessor's correct.
so you don't have to hand it.
Yeah, it's not necessary.
I think you stated earlier that his comparables were better than the mall comparables.
Much better,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
For this building, for the subject building,
Yeah,
yeah.
good.
I don't know how you would compare this to being in the same town square, this, when you go in the building.
Either party want summation?
well, for the summation, I just want to reinstate that the city has done a lot of work, and the board is familiar with it, why we use 2% instead of 7% for, what do you call them? Give me 1 second. For the expenses, why so board is familiar with that. I would ask the board to use 2%. Capitalization rate, again, it's been stated, and Mr. Story agreed to that smaller buildings tend to generate higher capitalization rates. He also brought forward information that they are being purchased, I guess, by the owners, to be further occupied by the owners, but that doesn't change the fact that that is the sale price and that is the capitalization rate. So 5.7% capitalization rate, I would ask the board to consider it. And it's brought forward that new rents tend to be more appropriate and better representation of the market value. So my evidence provides rents higher than what we have used here as a stabilized rent of 1379. So again, I would consider board to maintain the value. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Sorry, final
This,
word?
I didn't have any, but something just came up. It's not to confuse the board, there have been no sales. You're talking about a sale. There has been no sale of this property. So the
No,
7.5.
when I say sales in the marketplace.
Yeah, the market. Thank you.
All right.
Yep.
We'll
Good.
go on to the next party, the next property, which is 191 Marion Street, whenever you're ready.
With this property, 191 Marion Street, that's the one we're looking at, correct?
Yep.
I would like to add, I noticed that for some reason the printer obscured the images on page 10 and 11. They are very illegible, so I made a better copy of the same information. Would it be appropriate for me to add it
Okay.
as evidence?
Yep.
This is to go into your brief, to replace pages in your brief?
Well, it's to replace, it's the same information, but a better legible
Yeah,
copy.
you can't really read it, so.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. Just
Okay,
which
okay.
page is 11?
It's basically
Oh, yeah,
common expense
I got it.
method, 10, 11,
It'll be a lot easier.
Hey, you win.
All right, your presentation?
Okay, so my presentation, file number 194254. Roll number 0607502900. Street address 191 Marion Street. Owner is 191 Marion Holdings Limited. 2020 assessment with the reference date of April 1st, 2018, $923,000. It's a medical clinic consisting of 3 buildings, 2 premises and 1 story. Built in 1978, effective age 1987, built in 2019, effective age 2019, wall height 14 to 15 feet, C2 is a zoning, land area 6,311 square feet, plan area 4,841 square feet, gross floor area 4,841, and leasable area 4,440. Land plan area 1.3%. There is a recommendation to maintain the 2020 assessment at $923,000. Following pages I provide some pictures. Again, as before, we have aerial view of subject property, oblique view of subject property, street view of subject property on page number 3. Okay, so page number subject property, there is a historic sale, 2013, sold for $650,000 on page number 4. Page number 5 provides basic income approach to value, and with 4,440 square feet at potential rent of $69,862,000. We applied 5.5% vacancy loss, 2% expenses, shortfall rate of $7 per square foot, and 6.55% for capitalization, arriving at $923,000. Comparables are on page number 6. comparables with averaging of $15.36 per square foot and median of $14. Okay. Page 7 provides summary of income value summary. It's been discussed already. Again, value is $923,000. Okay, page 8 provides information on caps, capitalization rates. 9 provides some experts of Municipal Assessment Act. Page 10 and 11 have been are illegible, so the same information was provided as an additional information, which is an income and expense mailer. And income and expense mailer doesn't seem to provide a lot of information as to the monthly rents or anything like that. Information is omitted. Page 12 forward provides a fresh look, which describes why and how city has began calculating expenses at 2%. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
I thank you. Mr. Story, questions?
Yes, did you have an opportunity to visit any or all of the comps?
No, I did not have
No? Okay.
that opportunity.
And let's just go quickly to, a couple, touch base quick. What is the effective year? It says 1887 to 2019, 78 to 2019. How's that, those are not typically
Well,
effective year.
the way it works is actually it's not, you have to read it not across but in a column way. So
Okay.
there is number of buildings here, and
There's one building. There's
Well,
one small building.
it's one building, but the way it's recorded is every addition is recorded as a separate building. Yes, there's been addition done to the building. That's all. So originally the building was built in 1978, and that got an effective age of 1987. And that building has a 14-feet ceiling height. Oh, sorry, wall height. Then there's another building that was apparently recently added, so 2019 year built, 2019 effective age, 15 feet wall height. That's how I would read that information.
Okay, what was added? What size building was added in 15?
Okay, yeah, let me just get to that. Let's see. I had it. Okay, so there is a permit for 180 square feet addition.
180 square feet,
Yes.
okay. If we go to page,
When was the permit?
Occupancy permit dated March 8, 2019.
that's post-reference.
But the building condition, we look at it as current. Building condition is current.
Current.
Current building condition, right? In April 1st, 2018 market.
Are you sure the building permits were issued in 2019? So we've done this property for a number of years, it's always been the same.
Well, that's the information that I have here. Just see if I have a bit more. Give me 1 second.
We won't belabor this point, it's fine.
Yeah, I just.
Yeah, but I can tell you that.
Yeah, Mr. Story, let him present his evidence first, and then you can question.
I think he has. I'm not, where I'm questioning you now.
Yeah, we're question. He's asking me questions
Yeah.
about the permit.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Page 3 of your brief, that at the top is a photo of the family care, it says. Medical, you go in, on one side it's a pharmacy, and the other side it's an examination room. And what is the property immediately west of it? You can see a bit of it in the picture. Do you know what it is?
Okay, so immediately west of it would, it appears to be a 7-Eleven.
7-Eleven, correct. And you're aware that there's no parking, zero for this particular building?
Yeah, if, I would agree that probably there is
Sorry,
none.
I can't hear. Oh, are you ready? You okay?
Yeah.
I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, no, I agree
You're
that there
aware
is no
that
parking.
there's no parking?
Yeah, I agree that there is no parking.
Okay, and the street parking is even limited to 3:30, everything has to be moved, correct?
So, I don't know the specifics of the limitation of the on the street, but it is limited.
Yeah. Okay. And the cap rate for this in your brief was 6.55%, correct? And,
That's what it states, and yes, it is.
and let me just ask you quickly about your comps, if you may. Are you familiar with 161 Marion Street, your first comp? And
No, I am not familiar with this one.
it used to be a
It's,
credit union
Mhm.
and has very, very significant parking west of it and behind it, unlike the subject. Are you familiar with 260 St. Anne's? Your comp, these are your comps, I'm asking
Yes.
about.
No, I haven't visited.
Okay, 260 St. Anne is a long way from Marion Street in proximity to St. Boniface Hospital, which seems to drive these. Would you agree it's quite far removed? It's actually by it's called Bishop Grandin.
Oh, it is part of it.
169 Marion, are you familiar with that one?
It's like I haven't seen the building myself, but it's based on
Are you aware that it's got significant parking?
I cannot comment on the amount of parking.
No problem. Comp number 4, are you familiar with it? 383 Provenche, everybody's seen that on his Muron's Provenche.
Oh, yeah.
And it's got a massive parking lot, probably too big, you agree? Oh, you haven't seen it, okay, I've got pictures, I'll show you.
No.
Okay. And 136 Provenche has parking behind, it's got almost a retail store, but it has parking behind. You familiar with that property?
Well, it's just that it is on Provencher, right?
Yes, correct, okay. And it has parking. And 188 Marion is a Winnipeg prosthesis and orthodontics, sorry. That's the one you must have seen it because it's a long skinny building and it has that $9 comp, $9.63 from the other property, the other package you just did. And that one has loading at the front because it's people in wheelchairs and handicapped. And it has an ambulance entrance at the back. It's got 2 layers of parking. It's 37 stalls, I believe, attached to the building for staff and patients. And across the back lane, it's got overflow parking. Are you aware it's got that? There's significant parking on that subject? On that comp?
I'm not aware of the parking.
Okay. And then comp number 7, again, it's on St. Anne's Road. It's way out in Meadowwood. It's really not comparable to the subject, and it's a neighborhood shopping center, and it's got copious amounts of parking. You're not familiar with it?
Oh,
Okay, that's all right.
well, I mean, it does have parking, yes.
Okay, those are my questions on comps. And I think for now, those are all my questions.
I thank you. Mr. Feitch?
your page 10, which is the property income and expense questionnaire, I noticed the rental income is listed as 70,000, and I don't see any expenses here. And the net operating income is listed at 70,000. So I assume this must be in error by the individual who has filled this in. That would not be the actual net operating income.
So, this report doesn't provide a lot of information, so I cannot
That's
comment
correct.
on whether it is an error or whether it's actual, I don't know.
So you presented this to us. What would the purpose of this be?
It's typical format of presentation. If there is a income and expense mailer submitted by the property owner, we attach it to the documentation. And that's why I have attached it, except the original attachment was on page 10, I think it was.
Yes.
Was illegible, that's why I printed out a
Yes.
better copy.
All right. So then your illegible page 11, I note that the leased area, which has been provided here, is 4621. The leasable area that you have is 4440, and I think we'll be hearing from Mr. Story, he may be using a different leasable area. I'm trying to understand what what you believe is the total leasable area.
Well, total leasable area is area that is available to be, occupiable, area that is, that can be occupied by tenant.
Yes.
Mhm. So in this case, we have 46, let me just do a quick math,
Please.
and 44, 40. So we have 181 square feet difference, which is about equal to that 180 square feet addition that was mentioned earlier in the presentation. So that new addition that was built accounts for the leasable area that property owner has put down on the income and expense report.
Okay, so then, just to be clear, the total leasable area that you put forward, the 4440, is accurate, as far as you know, based on...
Well, that's what we have calculated as 4440, correct.
That's how you arrived at that,
That's how we have
using
calculated.
recent permits and additions.
It would appear to be that way, but now that I look at it, it may have to be reviewed because that 180 is just the way numbers work out. That 180 square foot addition doesn't seem to be reflected on our model. So I'll have to review it and see which one is which. But probably just use a smaller number for the purposes of this valuation.
Okay, no other questions, thanks.
I thank you, Mr. Buss.
I don't have any questions.
Mr. Story, your presentation?
I shuffled it, and I don't know where I shuffled it to. There. Oh, no. That's rebuttal on the comps. And let's see if I could, to kill 2 minutes, because I know what I put in my brief, I just had it.
The page number is 3.
Looks like that's it.
Yeah, no, remember, I just had it.
Yep.
That is yours, this one, so.
That's me, that,
Right?
that.
Oh, it's the same, oh, this is 18. This is 218, this is 2.
That's the one
I'm
we
sorry,
want,
you're right,
is the
yeah, it's got
218.
18 on it, the reference date. Okay, sorry about that. So, let's talk about this property for a moment. For many years, this was Ken's Carpet. It was a retail store, and Ken's Carpet, there's actually quite a bit of press coverage because he left because there was no place to park to get to the store. And there wasn't any, there's no loading or anything of that nature. So it was taken over by, it was purchased by an entrepreneurial group who lease out to doctors and pharmacists. And it is the main defining characteristic of this building, and all that's really important, is no parking, 0 parking. And it's generally hard to find parking in close proximity to St. Boniface Hospital. It's amazing the number of cars that it generates. It's also next door to a 7-Eleven, gentlemen. So, keep that in mind, please. Property's assessed at $923. I'm going to check the percentages here, could be wrong again. Again, we go to page 3 of our brief, and we're asking for $12.50 as a lease rate, 7% vacancy, and 8% cap rate. Why the cap rate of 8%? Lack of parking, lack of access and egress, age and physical condition of the building. The interior has been rebuilt. It's been broken into 2 sides. There's a pharmacy component and the medical where you get your treatments. If you look at page 4 of our brief, you can see the building, and the parking, if there were any, would be where those garbage bins are. Again, we tried to find some store-type comps, not very good. We'll have to go through the assessor's comp in a minute. The non-recoverable expenses, we're asking to be reinstated at 5%. I would quickly like to, if I could, to not to bore you any longer, go through the comp list we just handed out. Oh, I haven't handed it out.
Yeah.
And I'll go really quickly, I apologize. This is at 160, account number 1 is at 160 Marion, and it's a former credit union. You can see the parking on the west side of the building, all the cars parked. It's got ample parking. And if you see the drive-through, you can go behind the building, and I believe there's additional parking there. Comp number 2 we ignored. We ignored the 2 on St. Anne's because they're just too far removed from the site. And as much, the whole street, Goulet, Marion, all through there, there's nothing but these small medical clinics and whatnot, so you don't have to go to Bishop Grandin or St. Anne. So we ignored it, so there's no comp 2. Comp 3 is on, also on Marion Street, and again, parking is behind the building, a significant amount. Comp 4 is right at, I think it's Desmiron's, it's that condominiumized walk-up office building, and you can see it's got massive, massive parking. The next one's 136 Provencher, that's a retail store, that's new Bothwell cheese now, and the whole back street is parking. And the parking, and across the back lane is additional parking. So that particular building is ample parking. Then this is the interesting one, 188 Marion Street. Now this is right across the street from the subject. Prosthetics and orthodontics, orthotics, I'm sorry. And this is an interesting property because it has a door to drop off and pick up patients on stretchers. It has many handicap stalls at the back. It's got ample parking at the back, and I've got a picture of the overhead I'll show you in just a moment. We've done this property before, and I think we're 37 parking stalls on the building side of the back lane, and then they have the overflow. And this property, the assessor is suggesting a market rent of 188 Marion, the assessor is suggesting it's $14 a square foot. We've used it in our calculation. But the same, one of the units in the building is the one that was in the last package. And it's the end cap right by, no, I can't remember what it's called, the restaurant. And it's at $9.63 a square foot. Comp 7 is the one I was mentioning, that this is on St. Anne's, it's way out, it's sort of a, looks like a neighborhood shopping center, but it's not really comparable because of location and the fact that it has ample parking. And then if you go to Comp 6, 188 Marion, that's one I just mentioned. And if you look, that's the building, underneath where it says 188, that's the building, and there's all the parking stalls. And you see they start with that white car by itself, and then go down a dozen stalls, or 8 stalls, and there's a vehicle. So that building has tons of parking, and it's right across the street. It's immediately across the street from the subject property. So the question, the reason I bring this up is properties with out parking are more difficult to lease, obviously. Properties without parking in the close proximity to St. Boniface Hospital are even more difficult, because just street parking is hard to find. And they have a little patrol that sits in the 7-Eleven parking lot, and if you pull in to go pick up your prescription at the neighborhood place, Tartan comes and takes your car for a drive. They tow cars. So it's a difficult space for anybody to do this type of business, and that's a huge, huge issue. All of the comps have adequate parking. As a matter of fact, most of them are superior to most buildings with lots of parking. So we've just taken the three to come to 1196. They're, oh, I'm sorry. You pass this so quickly and then. And I just for information only, gentlemen, I looked at last year's while we were discussing. The last year, the square footage the city reported was 4260. So it appears they've added that 100 some square feet in the last cycle. This is just the market study. I've just taken the net rents. And the two I took out were not appropriate, with the two on St. Anne's. When you take them out, you end up with a median of $12 a square foot. These are all far superior to the subject, and as a result, I think 1150 is the right market rent. And I would ask that the board, I haven't checked these inputs yet, but a rent of $12.50, supported by actually the comps that we have comps that pseudo medical center, which we look at as retail. The assessors use we've used the assessors rents to support our $12.50. It's reasonable. 8% we think is a cap rate because of the lack of parking. I don't know anybody that in the marketplace would go and buy this particular property if they hadn't made arrangements somewhere else in close proximity to parked vehicles. So we're using 8% based on the age. It's variable, but it's an older building, and it's next door to a 7-Eleven, a 24-hour 7-Eleven. How would you like to have a pharmacy next door to a 7-Eleven? It's just incompatible, in my opinion. And we would ask the board to consider an assessment in the 550 range. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the applicant?
All right, so just going over the information you have provided, page 3 of your report.
Page 2?
Page 3.
3, yeah.
That's that is in. Is that an income expense? That's I guess that's
That's
the
the only
calculation you
expense.
have. That's not a, sorry. That's a calculation you have done, correct?
That's which?
Is that the calculation you have done?
Yes, correct. That's what we're asking. $12.50 market rent.
What is the square footage of the building?
Well, we're using the city's numbers.
Ah,
We're accepting the city's numbers.
okay, city's number is 4,440 square feet, you have 4,200.
Yes, we use the same as, I just indicated, we use the same square footage, because they haven't built anything in the last year. We use the same square footage that the city used in the last cycle.
So it's
So we
4,
may be wrong by 180 if they've added it. I don't know that they have.
well,
I think it was added long ago, but
what square footage did the property owner provide on their income and expense statement?
something different again. They show, and I should just mention something too. That one's hard to read. So hang on. They show 4621.
Okay. What number, what square footage do you use in your calculation?
We used last, what the assessment department told us last year, 4260.
Okay, what does assessment and department use a square footage this time around?
I don't think we have my properties on this, so I don't know. I can't say for sure, but I assume it would be 4260, but it may not be.
1 second.
I'm not gonna argue over 180 square feet. Use 46 if you're happy with that. And I just want to mention, it's not a big issue to them because these things are 100% rent. See what they say on here? And I'm assuming that's myself. But they show that the rent is $70,000 a year and it comes by 100% by way of percentage rent. So they're paying percentage rent. So that, to them, it may not be a big issue whether there's another 180 square feet or otherwise. So they pay percentage of, so by the look of it. And that 70, the reason it goes from the gross income to the net income is totally triple net. It's all paid, every expense is paid by the operators.
So what you're saying is $70,000 is the net operating income for such a property, correct?
Well, it appears that that's what they, I'm gonna say project to be the revenue,
Okay.
but it's 100% percentage rent. And that's the wrong place to put the 100%, that's where you would put in, that 70 would typically be dropped down one.
So,
But it's confusing for owner operators to fill out this questionnaire.
so you wouldn't, you would agree that instead of using any other number, we should be using $70,000 as net operating income? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm just, the gentleman on the board asked you a question about why the 70,000 was gross and net, I believe. And I think you answered it incorrectly. The reason it is, it's absolute triple net. There's another absolute worry-free where all the expenses are paid, including structural and whatnot by the tenant. And it appears that they pay rent because they show a question mark in the questionnaire for the amount of rent paid. And I think they put the question mark, that's on page, it's the second page of the hard to read stuff. So they show a question mark for the rent, and I think it's because it's monthly, it varies. I'm guessing, I don't know that for a fact.
Well, anyhow, let's continue on with the questions. Page 6 of your report, those are the comparable that you are using to...
Same argument as last. These are just comparables that we've used. Retail, because these buildings are somewhere between retail, flex warehouse, and suburban office.
Yeah.
We just threw in some rates, so you know some ideas of rates. We put it in here, you have a medical, like a pharmacy, medicine shop. You have some other miscellaneous tenants, but I indicated before that this is not as relevant as yours for comparables because these are in buildings that they're newer, they have other traffic, they feed off anchor tenants. The first one's 2065 Pembina, you have Winners, you've got Jisk, you've got Penningtons, those are big tenants. 1795 Henderson's, McIver Mall. There you've got, that is a 850, it's Marketplace, the food store, now called No Frills. 1399 McPhillips is Northgate, which just went through a $40 million facelift. So this is just to give you an idea that that's where we use this. We're gonna-
Yeah, but none of them in the same neighborhood as a subject property,
No, not
and
really.
they're totally irrelevant. That's how.
Well,
I'm
not
going
totally
to-
irrelevant, but yours are more significant, and yours supports our numbers.
No, the reason why I asked it, you kind of threw out some of my comparables due to their proximity. So
No,
you
excuse
should
me, I
say,
didn't hear what you said. What did I do about your comparable?
you just kind of mentioned that some of my comparables were not as relevant due to their proximity. So
Oh,
do you
yes,
think-
no, they
Do you
absolutely.
think the proximity of those
Yeah.
properties have any relevance
Yeah.
at this point then, given the same logic?
No, just to give you an idea what market rents are, all citywide, but
well.
in the case
Okay.
of yours, we threw out the two St. Anne's because we were trying to arrive at a median that was reflective of the community, of where they're located. The key to this whole package, we can talk all day and build lots of paper, is the building doesn't have any parking. It's next to a 7-Eleven.
But it's,
That's a tough building to value and
No,
to have a
and
lease on.
I agree with you on
Okay.
that, but we can also probably, yeah. But,
So it's less relevant than yours,
Okay,
but
so-
yours support our numbers.
Okay, but, so within that, we'll have to, I guess it's, so we have gone to the whole extent of everything, like, so given everything else, the evidence that comparables that I have provided are better representation of the comparable properties. That's how I'm to understand,
The
correct?
ones you have?
The comparables that I have provided
That
are
you've
better
provided?
comparables.
Yes,
correct?
they are, because they are in the area. However, you have to look at something that you don't use and the city should be using, and that's comparable adjustments. You can't just say, you gotta make adjustments superior, inferior. I'm suggesting that you're probably looking at $1.50 to $2 a square foot, just because there's parking versus not having parking. If you could ever lease that building conventionally,
But
without parking,
is a subject property leased?
it's leased on 100% rent, yes it is.
And is the lease net?
Pardon me?
Is the lease net? for subject-
Yes, it is, to the owners, yeah.
So
To the
the,
operators. The
And the-
owner is, these dental groups now are, they're management companies that are going in, providing them
Okay.
everything, and they,
do you know what the net lease amount is for subject property?
there's no way?
Do you know the net lease amount for total income for subject property?
Well, he's estimating that it's percentage rent, and I don't know for sure where that came from. I couldn't read that till today, so I don't know where the 70 came from. I don't know if that's his gross rent or not. He's showing a question mark for that, for rent.
But city's calculation also arrive at $69,000, so close to 70, so they're very similar. Do you see that?
Say that again?
Do you see on my, would you confirm that my report on page 5 provides total income of 69,862, which is very similar to what property owner
Yeah.
provides? Would you agree with that?
Yep.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Peich?
Just one quick question. The two separate offices in the subject property,
Yeah.
is the pharmacy accessible through the medical clinic?
Yes. And there are two different floor heights. They're about
Okay.
maybe 18 inches.
Okay.
Separate.
Does the pharmacy have a separate access through the back? Or I'm just wondering how they get in there, because I see one door in the front.
They come in, the customers or patients come in the front,
Okay.
and then they go in and they go to the, turn left, which is west, and that's the larger of the two spaces. And when they're finished there, they're dispatched to the pharmacy, which is elevated about 18 inches, and that's just the pharmacy, that's on the east side of the building.
Okay.
And the staff comes in through the back door,
Okay,
and the customers come in through the front door.
great, thank you.
There's a lot of security, I should tell you, on the doors to the pharmacy.
I thank you. Mr. Buss?
The parking in front, you can't park in front on that side of the street between 3:30 and 5:30?
Yes,
You gave that as evidence,
Yes, I get that.
and you know that?
It used to be, I presume it still is, because it's a way home, so I presume, I know it's restricted parking. You can't park there all day.
Okay, that's all my question.
Mr. Story, you concluded value or your presentation, you're at the 550,000.
550 round,
Okay.
yes.
you are aware that there was a sale in 13
Yes,
for 650,
yes.
okay? So you think the value has gone down?
Well, there was a sale for a specific purpose, and that's to get in close proximity to St. Boniface Hospital. So I think that there's a lot of reasons that this was done. It was also done with a medical group that were acquiring properties at that time. So it's, yes, it's possible. There's no, in terms of the market, maybe it's wrong and maybe they paid too much. That happens too.
Okay, I thank you.
Thank you.
Either party wants summation?
Just again, I'll do a quick summation again that evidence provided by the city with income of 69,862 is very similar to what we have talked about, and appears to be what income reported on income and expense mailer. Again, proximity to the hospital, such a property sale, as well as addition built post-sale by the current owners, and well, we talked about 2% expense, and so I would ask the board to consider all those factors and maintain the value at what it is, 923.
I thank you, sir. Mr. Story, final word?
The market rent's determined by the amenities, features, utility of the building. We have across the street an arm's length lease. It's called Healthy Strides. It's a $963 a square foot, it's arm's length. It's right across the street, plus it has parking. So keep that in mind. Number two, cap rate. Cap rate is based on the perceived risk the market sees in an investment. You look at age, they look at access, you look at egress. It's firstly age, then location, access and egress, ceiling height, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there is nobody going out there buying this type of property using cap rate. They're buying it based on their own utility. If they've got a use for it, or they have a group of professionals who are willing to come in and don't want the problems of running a practice and buying it out, they enter these agreements. So the cap rate on a property like this is difficult to determine, but it's similar to any older, these are actually functionally obsolete buildings, I would suggest, or close to functionally obsolete. But the two issues, and the big one that bothers me more than anything is that 7-Eleven next door. It's a 24-hour convenience store next to a pharmacy. That's a tough one, and that would make it difficult, in my opinion, to sell. So across the street, you've got a market rent considerably less in your comparables than the subject that we're suggesting for the subject. And the subject has no parking and is next to a 7-Eleven. And that in itself should justify cap rate well in excess of the 8% we're talking about. Thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Story.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And results very soon, so have a pleasant day.
Thank you.
We're going to take about a 5-minute break, and the other Mr. Story may come forward and get settled in. All right, we'll call the hearing back to order. Mr. Story,
Yes.
we'll get you sworn in or affirmed, either one.
You'll swear in this morning?
Sure.
Please state your name.
Jared Story?
Do you swear the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go to Osborne Street, 566, whenever you're ready.
Subject property was file number 193757. Roll number 1200060500. Street 566 Osborne Street. Owner is 3011429 Manitoba Limited. 2020 assessment year with a reference date of April 1st, 2018. Assessed value is $567,000. Property description would be it's a medical office clinic, one building with two premises, one story. 1953 year built, 1960 effective age with 11 feet wall height. Zoning is C2. Land area 5,743 square feet. Plan area 2,130 square feet. Basement area 1,290 square feet with a gross floor area of 3,420 square feet. Land to plan area is 2.7. The recommendation is to maintain the 2020 assessed value at $567,000. So page 2 has a picture of subject property. That picture is aerial view. The second picture is a street view. That is Fort Rouge Dental. And this bottom page is a big view of such property. Right, so page 3 provides some detail that back in January of 2006, the sale price of the property was sold for $176,000. Okay, so with income calculation, with $13.03 stabilized rent per square foot, 3,420 square feet, gives us a potential rent of $44,562. Applying 5.5% vacancy loss and 2% expenses and 7.05% capitalization rate, the estimated value is $567,000. Page 5 gives us comparable rents, and okay, so there is no average immediate calculation, but from the looks of it, the range goes from $15.50 to $24 per square foot of properties in close proximity to subject property in Riverview, Macmillan, and River Osborne neighborhoods. Some go to North River Heights and Rockwood neighborhoods. Okay. Page 6 provides again a calculation of how, well, basically it's income value summary, that's what they call it. So, okay, page 7 gives us information on cap rates. Page 8 provides information on some experts from the Municipal Assessment Act. Page 9 gives us the income and expense mailer reported by the property owner. So is page 10. Page 11 gives us a fresh look information on how City of Winnipeg have calculated expenses to be 2%. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Mr. Story, questions of the assessor?
Yes, just a few, thank you. Okay, have you visited this property?
No, I have not visited the property.
Okay, you're familiar with the area?
Relatively familiar with the area.
Okay, now, I can't help but note, you say you've got one building and two premises. This is one building and one premises, isn't it?
Give me 1 second. Based on the information I have, we have a basement area, which is separate from the main floor area, so that's where we have two premises.
Okay, so you're claiming that the basement area, 1,200 square feet, is a different premises. Is it leasable?
It appears to be usable.
Okay, is it not being used by, for all intents and purposes, is it the best way to categorize this as a dental office? Is that what this property is being used for?
It is.
Okay, and the basement is being used by the dentist, correct?
There's been, I would assume so, yes.
Okay. I'm gonna suggest that the basement is not a separately rentable premise. Now, the actual year built is 1953, but the effective year built is 1960. Can you tell me what gave rise to that change in effective age? It's all on the front page of your brief.
No, I know the information, I'm just, you asked what
Okay.
gives the rise, so I'm trying to find information for that. Okay, when the property was purchased in 2006, there was interior alterations permit taken out. That's where the effective age would have come into play.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, it was purchased, the owner did some work to, for the utility of his dental office, and somebody from the city said, we ought to adjust this by 7 years, is that correct?
It appears that way.
Okay. And this is Class D construction, is that correct?
Yes.
And can we agree that wood frame, stick frame, Class D construction generally leads to a higher repairs as the effective age of the asset moves forward? Is that fair to say?
Sorry.
It costs more to own a building that's older, that's Class D construction, than a newer building of a higher grade construction. Is that not reasonable? Can we agree on that?
I don't think I can agree on that.
Oh, okay, well, we'll disagree. Now, you've got page 2 here. Now, we've talked a fair bit about 7-Elevens, and I would tend to agree. A dental office next to a 7-Eleven is not ideal. Would you agree with that?
Again, I do not agree with that.
You don't agree with that, okay. Can we agree then on the, let's take the subjectivity out of this argument, we have restricted parking on the main street, on Osborne Street, is that correct?
Well, it's just street parking.
Right, so it's time restricted, correct?
I'm not aware whether it is time restricted.
You see that little sign in your brief, right? It's time restricted. That's on that pole. This street parking is time restricted down this stretch of Osborne. This is the 500 block, mid 500 block. Now,
I don't see that, but
you don't see that? Okay, it's in the middle picture. On this pole, you can see the no stopping between, you know, whatever time it is. It's time restricted parking on the main
I
street.
don't see it.
Okay. Well,
Maybe.
perhaps if you visited the property, you'd be aware of this. Now, we can also say that we've got Fred Tipping Place right across the street. Are you aware of that?
Are you pointing to the high-rise?
I'm pointing to the social housing subsidized seniors complex right across the street. It's called Fred Tipping Place. It's been there
Okay.
since 1973. Are you aware of that?
Well, I don't know the specifics of that building,
Okay.
but if you, so
Okay, well,
how is
that's
it
fine.
relevant?
And now you can't see it here, but I'll allude to it. But this is something called the Reuben Block. Are you familiar with this property?
Which one are you pointing to?
That's at the very corner of, that would be Morley and Osborne.
Okay,
You aware of
that's
that
an
property?
apartment building again, right?
No, that's an abandoned derelict building that's been a massive problem for the neighborhood for many years. There was a murder there, there's been a fire, there's been a flood. So I'll ask you, do you think it's an objectively positive element to be next to a derelict building? Or do you think it's objectively negative?
I would say that I don't think how that plays into, how that is relevant altogether, but
Do you not think location is a relevant issue when it comes to determining the value of real estate?
the location in the neighborhood, yes, and the neighborhood is very desirable, and Osborne Street is a very busy commercial street.
Okay, and you think being next to a derelict, dilapidated, boarded up building that has a history of issues is a positive? That's what you're saying?
I don't see how that particular building would affect the value of the subject.
It's right next door, okay. All right, that's fine, so I'm looking at your income valuation. Now I'm gonna assume that this is all modeled, is that correct?
I would assume, sorry, you assuming that what is
I'm
model?
asking you if all the inputs that you've used to come to your valuation conclusion
Yeah.
on page 4 are modeled.
They are modeled,
And
yes.
you didn't overwrite any of them?
No, I did not.
Okay, so you, okay, and that cap rate, of course, is modeled as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now let's look at your comps, this is page 5. Did you select these comps yourself?
Yes.
Okay, and did you investigate any of them? Did you do any reading about them or any research on them?
I haven't done any, I guess I haven't visited the sites.
Okay, but you haven't researched them even online, just did a quick Google search?
No, I have not.
You have not, okay. So you're not aware that number 1, comp number 1 is used by Winnipeg Transit. Now, I'm familiar with this from a different file that I worked on, but Winnipeg Transit leases that building, and they are motivated by the fact that they were overseeing their renovations to their central hub, which is across the street. So you're not aware of that, I'm gonna guess?
I cannot speak to the specifics of the motivation.
Okay, is it safe to say that it's not a medical office?
No, it's not.
Okay, and number 2 is not a medical office either, is it?
No, it states as office standard.
Office center, and it appears to be leased out by government-affiliated organizations, which would tend to come with a higher covenant, is that correct?
I don't, just give me 1 second. Let's see. Which one are you talking about?
Number 2, that's Jim Carr's office.
The 611 Corridor Avenue?
Yeah, and there's also the Nature Conservancy of Canada in there, those are the 2 tenants. So those would be covenanted by the government, correct?
611 Corridor, I have the Spectrum Financial.
Okay, well, I investigated that yesterday, and that's fine, but it's not a medical office, that's safe to say.
It's not.
Okay, numbers 3 and 4, that's interesting. That's in a condominium building, fairly new condominium building on Osborne, or off of Osborne, it's called the Pulse Condo, is that correct?
I'm not aware.
Okay, and it's being used by an architectural firm, from what I can tell.
Okay, let me just give me a second. Yes, it is, architectural company.
So, do you think that that's appropriate to use a lease of an architectural firm when we're looking at a dentist's office?
I think the medical offices come farther down the list, and you can see it as comparable 5 and further.
Yeah.
So I agree with you that medical offices are better be used with medical offices, and
Okay.
therefore I would.
Okay, that's fine. Now, medical offices, we've got the Tuxedo Medical Center. Are you familiar with that property? That's, and these are comps 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Well, they're medical offices, right? That's.
Would you say that they're superior?
Let me just take a quick look at it. They may be very well superior properties.
Fairly new, built in 2015, 3 years out from the reference date. Ours is quite old. They have a large parking lot, and I would suggest a vastly superior location. Is that fair to say?
I wouldn't say, I wouldn't, I would agree with you that the building itself is superior. Location-wise, I would say they're similar. They're both on a very busy streets, both Arthur and Corridor, and a very busy.
Okay, but you said you're not completely familiar with the area of the subject. Are you familiar with the area of this comp, of these comps?
I said that I'm relatively familiar with the subject, which is probably more accurate than not familiar, and everything is relative.
Everything is relative. Everything is relative, I suppose. All right, now on Stafford, this is a property we'll be dealing with on this docket, and what I couldn't help but notice is you're using a lease rent of $23 here, but in the brief, you've got 18. So that, how does that work? Why are they not the same?
What are you talking about at this point?
Well, I'm saying that you've used 395 Stafford, which is my
Okay.
client, that's on the docket today, you're aware of that, correct?
Okay.
Okay. And in the docket, in your brief, you used $18, but as a comp, you used 23. So why is that? Just some insight. I'm confused about it.
Well, I'd sooner you not go there because they're not dealing with that
All right,
property.
fair enough. Okay, that's fine. All right, so those are my questions on your comps, thank you. Now, just a question on your, you've included the broker's reports for cap rates. Is it fair to say that this office that we're dealing with today is a suburban B?
I would say that it is a suburban office. I'm not aware of any further classifications for the property.
It's built in the 1950s, it's stick frame construction, it's next to a dilapidated building, and 7-Eleven has restricted street parking and scatter parking and an unpaid lot in the back area, and I think the brokers would suggest that this is a B. Would you not agree with that?
I cannot comment on that kind of
Fair enough. And
suburban.
would you say then that the broker's studies typically, if not exclusively, only include investment grade properties?
Again, I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
Okay, well, let's assume they do. Now, if this is a suburban B, if it's investment grade, which is superior to the inputs that are used to create the broker's studies, the brokers would suggest a cap rate of no less than 7.25%, and would likely be in excess of 7.5%. This is in your evidence on page 7, correct?
On page 7, let's see.
It's the broker's studies on cap rates.
So would you point out exactly what you pointed?
Sure. Office,
Suburban
first
B.
level, suburban B.
Okay.
Let's look at Colliers. Colliers says, and this is, again, this is investment grade, and I will suggest to you that a lot of these cap rate inputs include land transfer costs and other fees, so they're generally depressed, they would likely be higher, but we're going with the information that you have. CBRE would say that this is a 7.25, CBRE would say 7.5, Cushman would say 7.5, and Colliers would say 7.25, correct? For investment grade. I'm suggesting this is not.
We have a range, right? There we have a range of low and high. So we have for coilers, we have 6.5 to 7.25. For CBRE, we have 7 and 7.5, and for Cushman, 6.75 and 7.5, right? That's, is that your?
So the brokers are suggesting that for investment grade properties, this would likely be a 7.25 or 7.5. If it were investment grade, I'm suggesting it's not. Okay, those are my questions, thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Fitch.
I did have a question, it's about the income and expense statement. It's not very legible, and I wonder if you can clarify for me, it's on your page 9. The total expenses there, is that 17,000?
17,059, 59 basically. I'm gonna round it.
And then the net operating that's been provided is?
60,370.
And it's owner occupied?
I do not. I cannot tell you whether it is owner occupied.
It is owner occupied, just to say.
Thank you, that's fine, thanks.
Okay. Mr. Buss?
I have no questions at this time.
I just have just a couple. The breakdown, the main floor is 2130? 2130 square feet?
Now let me just see.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and the basement is the balance, I guess, 1290?
Yes.
Okay. You haven't been to this property at all?
No, I have not been there.
So I just, looking at the pictures, et cetera, so I see that there's a 7-Eleven close to the subject, and
Yes.
I think I know at the corner there's a boarded up building, as far as I know. Okay, so not the greatest, I guess, area, possibly. I mean, it is, I guess, Fort Rouge. So your comparables, the only one that is probably in the area is number 1, which is on Osborne Street, which is Riverview. And that's where the subject is, eh?
Yes.
So all the rest of them are, I probably would say, superior in location, because they are River Heights Corridor area.
I agree that number one is the best comparable.
Yeah. Okay. I have no other questions. So, Mr. Story, the floor is yours.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Okay, 566 Osborne Street. Again, this is a dentist's office, Fort Rouge Dental. And as you rightly pointed out, Mr. Chair, we are between the Rubin Block, which is boarded up and has been abandoned for some time, and a 7-Eleven. We've got a little retail space in between there, but that is the block. So just to get a sense of where we are. The building was built in 1953. It was a single story with 2,180 square feet on the main floor and what we're calling 3,420 square feet of leasable area. Now that's basement and upper. I will suggest to you that the basement is not leasable to a separate tenant. Quite frankly, you've got 7 parking spots in the back. You wouldn't be able to staff this building if you had 2 different tenants in here for all intents and purposes, nor would you be able to have clients visit. Okay, so the city is suggesting a 2020 realty assessment of 567. We're suggesting that 373 is more appropriate. Again, this is a 1-story wood frame office building, Fort Rouge Dental Group, and it's on the east side of Osborne between Bartlett and Morley. Okay, so the site is rectangular in shape. It's got C2 commercial community zoning, and we have some scattered parking at the rear and time restricted parking up front. Okay, now we have used the income approach to value this property. So we did look to the market to see what a reasonable rent might be. Now, I had mentioned Fred Tipping Place in my cross-examination. The reason why I mentioned that is to point out where we were, but also I think that on some level there is some economic benefit to being close to a senior's place, especially if you in a medical office. So one of my comps I used is a far superior location, and it is right next to not a subsidized seniors housing tower, but a private one. So I think that's appropriate. So we've looked to Broadway. Now, this is Donald and Broadway. You'll know it is the building with the Starbucks on the main floor. It's an excellent location, has some parking issues I would imagine, but a good location in general. $13 a square foot there. Our next raft of comps here on 3025 Portage, and that is just past Portage, Boulevard, and that's where the seniors area that I mentioned was. And there's also a bit of an agglomeration of different medical offices in that it's a medical park. Wonderful amounts of parking and very close to the seniors tower. I think that's a great comp as well. Those are about $12 a square foot. I have 333 St. Mary. I thoroughly disagree that being in a mall is a detriment. I think it's an absolute add to value. This is in City Place. We're on the Skywalk system. We've got 25 buildings attached to that Skywalk system, tens of thousands of workers. I think that's an excellent comp. And they're at $11.23 a square foot. And I will suggest too, we mentioned different restrictions and hours. Well, I don't know too many doctor's offices that are open past 5 or 6 anyway, so I think that's a moot point. Unless it's a walk-in or something like that. Now, 1661 Portage is the hub building, and that's an excellent location as well, with a huge amount of parking, and they're at $15 a square foot, an objectively superior location, and a newer building. So, with all these points taken into consideration, we come to an average rent of $11.80 from these comps, $12 on the median. So we've applied $12 per square foot. That may be a little bit high for this building, but for the main floor, we're using $12 per square foot, and a standard way to value the basement, though it would likely be included in the rent on the main floor, we've used a rate of $6. So with all those points taken into consideration, the total potential gross rent on a net basis is $33,300, or $974 per square foot overall. And that's a blended rate between the main level and the basement. In terms of vacancy, we have accepted the city's model vacancy of 5%. Now, for non-recovered expenses, you all know this, but we do continue to apply a 7% erosion to the income stream that that is representative of a 2% structural reserve and a 5% stabilized allowance for non-recoverable expenses that arise from the competent management of an asset. The shortfall rate is accepted, that's it's a 7%, so it's $7. And in terms of the cap rate, we've applied a cap rate of 7.5% based on the age and location of the property. Now, the city has used a 7.5% cap rate in 2018, as we have. We see no cap rate compression between Q1 2016 and Q1 2018, so a 7.5 cap rate for the cycle over cycle purposes is appropriate. So with all of those points taken together, we come to an indicated market value of $372,653. So we respectfully submit that the value for this asset for the 2020 assessment cycle ought not to exceed $373,000. Now I've got some photos of our subject. Here's the Rubin block, boarded up and problematic. Here's our subject. Here is 7-Eleven. Now what's interesting too is I went by this property, and you can see to get to the parking, you actually have to go around the 7-Eleven, through the back lane, and this is our sort of scattered, generally unimproved parking lot at the back. So that's just an issue that we take into consideration. You can see the interiors, some work has been done to allow this fellow to have his dental office. And so again, we ask that the value be amended to $373,000. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions of the applicant?
Sure. Again, would you agree that location plays a big factor in value of the property?
I think when you look at the economics of real estate, I think location is generally, we look at the bid rent function of economics and marry that with the general underlying positive valuation theory. Yes, location is probably the most important thing.
Okay. So just find it on your page here. Give me 1 second. Alright, so for the most part, you place lots of weight on comparables out in 3,000 portage area, 3,025 portage. That's a bit far away from subject property, would you agree?
A bit far away. I think it's, no, I think it's appropriate to use those comps. I'm actually showing you the medical office universe, and I think what I've done here is I've showed you superior product on the market. So logic would dictate, the principle of substitution in real estate valuation theory would indicate that if you could be in that building for say $13 a square foot, you would never pay more than that to be in this location. I agree with Fort Rouge. Excuse me. No, may I finish?
Yes.
Thanks. I think that Fort Rouge is generally a very, very good location. Absolutely. I think that this block has some issues. That's what I'll suggest when it comes to your question on location.
Okay. So again, more appropriately, like sticking to Fort Rouge would be more appropriate. Like if you would be able to find comparables on, let's say, somewhere in Fort Rouge or on Osborne Street, that would be more appropriate.
I'm going to suggest that you find rents in and around the $10 range if we did that. So I think I've been actually very liberal with my assessment of this property. It does provide utility to an owner, but it's not an investment grade property. It's not something that an investor would purchase and then try and lease out on the open market. These assets are purchased for the utility of the owner. That's what the market tells us.
Medical offices, from your experience, they tend to generate slightly higher rents per square foot than standard offices.
Well,
Is that your experience?
there's an issue with medical offices where we can get into a longer discussion about this, but generally if it is a investment grade property, there may be inducements there. So an owner may have to put in metagas and other sorts of amenities that would not be typical of standard regularly finished office space. So from your perspective, you might see it that way, but net to the owner, I don't know that they generate more rents to the owner. I think that there's a trade-off there with inducements.
But medical, but I'm just saying, you would agree that standard offices sometimes could represent a cubicle space of just an open building, whereas medical offices tend to have separate rooms. Would you agree with me on
Are you
that?
asking me if medical offices tend to have a different structure in terms of how they're demised on the interior?
Yes.
Waiting rooms and stuff?
Waiting rooms,
And I think that
visiting rooms, all other little
Right.
rooms where clients.
That comes at a cost to the owner, to prep that space for that purpose.
Exactly, and that cost has to be recovered, therefore typically the price per square foot would be higher. Would you agree with me?
You're talking about are we talking about a gross rent here or a net rent?
Doesn't matter which one.
No, I think it does. Okay, that's fine.
Well, actually,
Well, I think it
based
does.
on net rent, I'll take it back, sorry.
Okay,
Based on
okay.
net rent would probably typically would be higher. Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peich.
Thank you for the pictures, they're very helpful.
Thank you.
Do you have pictures, or are you able to offer a description of the basement?
No, I don't. My understanding is that generally, now I am speculating, but what I will assume is that there's record keeping and things like that. Medical offices tend to use basements for, older equipment or other office fixtures. It's not being used as you don't go and get a root canal in the basement. It's storage, yeah.
Okay. And based on your pictures of the main floor and the nature of the construction, it would appear that there are no windows into the basement.
That's correct, yeah. There's very little windows in this whole building, actually. Yeah, they face the back parking.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buss.
So is there one dental office in here, and then he has another?
One dental office.
Have you inspected the property?
I've been on the exterior, I've not gone into the interior, but I found the photos online that I thought were a good representation. But I have certainly been through at the site, and I was sort of, I've been to the site a number of times. I've done a number of properties in that.
But you haven't been in the basement?
No, I haven't been in the basement, no.
And for the record, you said, I think you might have said it was next door to that old building there, but it's not next door.
Well,
It's on the same block.
It's one door away, but, yeah. And I believe actually I do the building next to this one, and I believe that there's a vacant space that's been vacant for some time between the roof block and this one, so.
Well, but in your picture, it looks like there's another building in there.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah.
But I believe at some point that was regardless, it is within immediate proximity to the.
Yes, no doubt, it's on that same block. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Story, just one little observation, I guess. Normally what happens on these type of buildings, either the city or the applicant address the main floor and usually 50% to the basement.
Yeah.
But I was just looking at the pictures, and that's the main floor. We don't know what the basement's like.
No, I don't.
Okay. Would it be anything like the main floor, or would it be
No.
storage?
No, it's storage.
Storage.
It's storage. And typically with these leases, you're gonna see, you rent the main floor and the basement tends to be included. Now, I haven't had a chance to inspect it, so I put a rate on it, which
Okay.
again, I believe that's a liberal way to value this property.
All right. Summation to either party?
No, actually, again, just a quick summation that we have, it's been presented, and my evidence suggests that the price per square foot is supported by the market evidence, and I would ask the board to consider 2% expense and capitalization rate that city has provided of 7.05%, which falls in line with the capitalization rate studies. And I would ask the board to maintain the value at 567. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Story.
Yes, thank you. Just briefly, I'd like to say that I believe that our valuation is more adequately representative of the market view. We've not using a model or looking at the site-specific analysis of each property. I believe that's more representative of how the market would view this asset. Thank you.
I thank you. We'll go on to 1835 Cordon Avenue, whenever you're ready.
Okay, 1835, okay, file, yes, sir. Subject. Subject property was a file number 193580, roll number 12073143000, 1835 Carillon Avenue, owned by Cades Center for Inflammatory and arthritic disease. 2020 assessment year with the reference date of April 1st, 2018 has assessed value of $730,000. It's a medical office building with one building, 4 premises, and 2 stories. 2003 year build and same year effective age, 9 feet ceiling height, Class D wood or steel frame exterior walls, zoning is C1, land area 6,397 square feet, plan area 2,137 square feet, basement area 2,076 square feet, gross floor area 5,096 square feet, and leasable area is 4,989 square feet. Land to plan area is 2.99% ratio. Okay, so the recommendation is to maintain the 2020 assessed value at $730,000. Page 2 provides some sale history of the subject property, but they are $1 sales. Page 3 shows comparable sales, and there again we have a range going from $22 to $24 per square foot net rent. Okay. Page 4 provides total lease, provides a calculation of value, and with total leasable area of 4,989 square feet, we have a potential rent of $52,520. Applying 5.5% vacancy, 2% shortfall, and shortfall per square, 2% expenses, and shortfall of $7 per square foot, and capitalization rate of 6.4%, we arrive at $730,000. All the rents that are used there, the highest one is $19.63, and which is in line with comparables. Page 6 provides calculation of cap rates. 7 is experts from Municipal Assessment Act. Page 9 provides a copy of the income and expense mailer, and I didn't notice it, but this one is also very fizzy. So okay, so page 10 provides just fresh look, calculation how city arrived at 2% expenses. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
I thank you. Mr. Story, questions of the assessor?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so just so we're clear, this is not a standard office or medical office, is it?
Okay. I don't see, like,
Have you seen this building?
I think I have, just, for some reason my presentation does not provide any pictures of it.
There's no photos here, so I'm just wondering if you've ever seen this building.
I have seen it, and I'm trying to, just to make sure that what I'm seeing it is, and I believe that it was a converted residential building, if I am correct.
Right, it was
From what I
a
remember.
house that they converted to office space, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's fine. Now, you've got a couple sales here. That's okay. Now, you mentioned these leases that you're using, these rents as comps, and these are, now we haven't used any standard office space, we've only used medical office space. Can you say yourself?
Well, your gross incomes are exactly the same, so
Okay, that's fine.
and there's no benefit to talk
Okay,
about
that's okay.
rents.
Yeah, we can skip over the rents, that's fine. All right, now the cap rate is modeled, is that correct?
Correct.
And do you think that a building that has been reconverted for the purposes of housing medical offices from a home ought to carry a higher or lower cap rate in general?
I believe that cap rate that is, well, to answer your question, I guess, whether it should be higher or lower, there is no standard rule, I don't think, to say that, you know, this building is converted, so the cap rate should be higher. I don't think so.
Do you think there's a limited market for this type of space compared to a standard office space?
Well, if the building serves the the purpose, and location also plays a role there, so so to answer the question whether there is cap rate difference in buildings that have been converted versus a standard building that was built for the purpose of medical offices, I cannot say there is.
Okay,
I don't think.
that's fine. Okay.
I think it's going to depend on many other factors. Basically, just saying that this building was converted, I don't think it will play a role in the cap rate.
Okay, in terms of your cap rate study that you've used to model these cap rates, how many converted buildings were included in that study?
Yeah, let's see. Okay, probably none.
No, okay. And how many medical offices were included in that study?
Boy. They're all medical offices.
Okay. How many multi-tenants, okay, so we don't, so is it safe to say we don't know about the inputs to the cap study that the city is using to value all these properties?
Well, we do have cap rate studies.
Right. Do we have any backup support or calculations or anything that show how the city has created this cap rate table for this cycle? Is there any evidence?
Well, I cannot speak on. This study, like, no, the city typically analyzes the sales. That's how they calculate it. Like that's all I can say.
I suppose what I'm driving at is the city is not willing to provide any calculations or backup information to the ratepayer based on how they imputed their cap rate study. Is that correct?
I can answer to the question.
Now, are you aware in the last 2 cycles, Altus and the city have both agreed that a 7% cap rate is appropriate for this property?
I am not aware of any sort of agreements on the cap rates.
Okay. Is it your opinion that there's been cap rate compression between the 2 cycles, or have cap rates remained relatively flat in this asset class?
Again, I do not have information with me to answer the question.
Okay, those are my questions, thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Peich.
I have none, thank you.
Mr. Buss?
Are there any permits, were there any permits taken out to change this from a residential house to a dental office?
Yeah, I have to read through.
Do you have the initial permit that was taken out
It may.
in 2003?
It's not have the complete information as to what has been done with the building.
Okay, that's fine, if we don't have it, that's fine.
It may have been actually rebuilt. Now that I look at it, but
Pardon me?
It may have been rebuilt, but I'm not. No, I don't think I have the. I don't think I can answer a question in a timely manner. I'll have to.
That's fine.
I think, Mr. Buss, we can probably ask the applicant in regards to that. But like I say,
That's all my
there
question.
doesn't seem to be,
That's all my question.
okay, I thank you. This must have been a house before that was probably converted? Do you
Yes,
think?
yes, mhm.
Okay, so I just saw some of the applicant's pictures. So the address is on Corden,
Mhm.
and I guess in looking at the picture, it looks like there's a heck of a big lot, okay? And it probably, because the civic address, it probably fronts Corden.
Yeah.
But,
Mhm.
but you haven't been to the property at all, or maybe driven past it?
No, not, well, I'm sure I've driven past it, but not with the, for the purpose of those.
All right. Mr. Story, your presentation.
Thank you very much. Okay. So we're at 1835 Corden Avenue. I believe you're correct. I believe, now, our records indicate that this property was built in 2003, but I believe that there was some improvement, and I think you're right, that was facing Lockwood based on the vintage of the area. This would be an atypically large lot. It may have been two lots that were joined together, but we're not disputing the effective age of 2003, that's fine. But I do believe that it was certainly built, this was not the house that was there. This was built for the purpose of enjoying a few different people with there's some medical, there's a lab in there, and then there's a fellow who's running his business in about 900 square feet in an office. So it's a group who have come together, and they're operating out of this unit. So again, I will not belabor the potential net market income. We're about $500.
Your bone of contention is
Well, it's on
the cap rate
non-recoverables
and non-recoverable.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so, and I will suggest that a building that was of this style, and you can see it in my brief, there's no photos provided by the city, but in my brief, you can see that this is an atypical space, so it will have I'll say it has a limited market, and some tenants will see this as a huge benefit, some will see it as a detriment, but it's, I'll call it architecturally non-conforming, for the best way to describe it. It also only has 4 parking stalls and three enterprises operating out of it, which is not ideal, though there is street parking on Lockwood. Okay, so again, originally constructed as a residential dwelling, renovated and expanded in 2003. Gross floor area is 5,096 square feet, leasable area of 4,989 square feet. I'm not sure what gives rise to that small difference, perhaps there's a hallway or something like that, I'm not sure. But again, no elevator, so this limits the kind of a public health office in there. And an agent from our firm has visited this in the last couple of cycles, and the remarks in the file say that the interior is unremarkable and typical of standard office space, considered suitable for general use. The flooring generally includes a mix of carpeting, tile, and vinyl, and the site only accommodates 4 parking spots. Okay, the subject size is approximately 6,533 square feet. So again, we've used actuals to come to our potential net market income. We've not disputed the vacancy allowance of 5.5%, though in a tenant with in a building with 3 tenants, the proportional vacancy is riskier. And if a cap rate is the numerical assessment of risk, we have to look at the potential durability of the income stream. So that speaks to the desirability of this asset on the market to different tenants. We have to think about, well, will this income stream appreciate over time? And then the third part of cap rate is what about other investment vehicles? So it would be, if we were to invest in this property, the return that we would have to see has to outpace other less intensive investments. So if you had a passive investment that was generating a higher return, you wouldn't look to a real estate investment that was lower, that was more, that required more active management. So for all those points taken together, we continue to apply a cap rate of 7%. Now, again, I've mentioned in my cross-examination that both Altus and the city have used 7% in 16 and in 18. We've generally recognized the sort of site-specific abnormalities of this property, I'll call them, and we've come to terms at 7%. Again, I will carry this forward as we've seen no cap rate compression and the economic reality of this asset has not changed from cycle to cycle. Literally nothing has changed. So with all those points taken together, we are suggesting that a value of $627,000 is appropriate for this cycle. And again, in my appendices, I've included some photos. Here you can see our parking. Just have a general sense of the building. No interior photos. Apologize for that, but I don't have a chance to inspect the interior. And I have taken the word of our agent saying that it is unremarkable. So, and I tend to think that that's probably true. It's that is certainly true, as it's furnished for the utility of these three people who are running their enterprises out of this space. So again, we request that the value for the 2020 cycle respectively be adjusted to $627,000. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Questions of the applicant, Arca?
Actually, give me 1 second here. So, I just want to clarify, you did mention that this building was fully constructed new or substantially renovated for the purposes of the medical office. Is that what, is
That's our
that correct?
understanding, yeah. There may have been some other improvement on the property that was renovated and expanded, but I don't think we're arguing the effective age of the asset, so that seems to be the main point at this point.
And the only point of contention that we have here is a cap rate. Is that?
Well, the non-recoverables and the cap rate.
The cap rate you mentioned is, I guess, a point of risk, and it's dependent on other potential investments that may return similar or better returns.
Well, that's one point of the cap rate, yes. There are many parts of that. So that's the principle of substitution. There's also the principle of anticipation. So how durable is this income stream? And will it appreciate over time?
Exactly. So in your opinion, I think, would you agree with me that real estate market in the city of Winnipeg has been appreciating both commercial, on commercial side and residential side? And
Well, it's a much larger discussion that we can have and talk about different asset classes and different areas for that. So
okay,
that's,
but
do I think it's a stable market? Yes. And do I think that continuing on with this 7% cap rate is appropriate? Yes.
okay, and would you agree if there is no other potential returns on investments for a given investment opportunity? Let's say if somebody had, let's say, I guess, let's give it a round number of $700,000 or whatever to invest somewhere, and they would look at this building and say, you know what, I may invest here, or I may invest somewhere else. There's few other places that that would generate, like, return on investment is very low in given economic conditions.
Sure, but okay, that becomes a different question about the cost of money, about the bond market, the overnight rate, about all sorts of economic indicators in that scenario. But what I would say to you, and I've heard that argument before, and I think it misses a substantial element. It's that I've heard it said that, well, if an apartment block is $1.5 or $2 million, doesn't that attract investment from non-institutional investors? Yes, it does, and that's tantamount to a great deal more risk, isn't it? If you weren't somebody who was occupying this building, and you had an agglomeration of other people who needed this kind of space, and you had to invest in this space and go out and find people, that would be tantamount to a great deal of risk. Your vacancy would go up, your costs would go up. So I would suggest that that would be tantamount to more risk.
Well, but then again, like we have cap rate studies, right? And the cap rate that city used, does it fall within the range of cap rate studies?
No, but you've also included the broker studies, and I'm going to suggest to you this is absolutely not a investment grade property. So the brokers at a minimum would likely apply an 8 or 9 cap to this. I think we've been very liberal in valuing this property, and we've generally said, okay, 7% is reasonable. And again, I'm carrying forward with that, but I think that if you put this on the actual market, you'd see a different cap rate that would likely be higher.
But I guess in my opinion, and maybe you would agree with me, that location also plays a role, and being right on Corridon serves a lesser of a risk than being, let's say, a couple of blocks away from Corridon. Would you agree with me that?
I think that's reflected in the rent, and I also think that this is a right-minded owner. They're astute enough to know that if they could lease the space out for more than what they're getting for it, they would.
Yeah. So I guess like because cap rate is the only point of contention right now, like that's and we've discussed it all. I guess I don't think I have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Page.
Thanks.
Mr. Buss,
No questions.
summation, either party?
Yeah, I'll be quick. I guess cap rate. The cap rate that city have used at whatever it was, 6.4%, falls in line with cap rate studies for suburban offices at anywhere between well, basically the 20 years and 80th percentiles falls between 6.2 and 7.3%. So that's where I think the cap rate is supported, and I would ask the board to maintain it and maintain the value. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Story, final word?
Thank you. I'm just going to suggest that on the cap rate, typically, a non-conforming building such as this ought to carry a higher cap rate, but we have agreed on this rate for the last 2 cycles. We've not seen compression from the last cycle to this cycle, so I think that carrying on with the 7% is wholly appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on to the next property, which is Stafford Street, 395 Stafford. Mr. Story, you've appealed 3
Yeah, the
liability
I
classification.
believe the owner filled that out on
Okay.
That's not our, we can withdraw
I
that.
think you probably,
Points?
I think they just checked everything.
yes, but I just have to bring it up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
So, do we get them, can we sign off on it?
Yes, yeah, we'll
Good.
withdraw those right now.
All right. The floor is yours, Arca.
Alright. Subject property, file number 192760, roll number 120975031000, address 395 Stafford Street, owner is 5244161 Manitoba Limited. 2020 assessment roll with reference year of April 1st, 2018 has assessed value at $1,465,000. A little bit about subject property. It's a medical office clinic with 1 building and three premises and 2 stories. 1976 year build, 1983 effective year build. 10-foot wall height, Class D wood or steel frame exterior walls, C1 zoning, 12,129 square feet for land area. Plan area is 3,600 square feet. Gross floor area 7,318 square feet. There is no basement. Leasable area 6,005 square feet. Land to plan ratio 3.37. Okay, so the recommendation is to maintain the 2020 assessment at $1,465,000. Okay, so page 2 has some pictures of the subject property. It's based in Stafford, and it's 2 blocks north of Grand. It's a 2-story building. Okay, so page 3 provides street view of the building. Because signs there states A plus 1 financial service Ltd. Right across the street there's another 7-Eleven.
As a team.
Something about that.
So what we have next is Again, sales in 2009 and 2013 all have consideration of $1. 2013 sale has a sworn value of $619,000. Okay, what do we have here? Let's see. Okay, page 5. Stabilized price per square foot, $18.07, 2,733 square feet of leasable area. Arrives at $49,207 for potential rent, 5.5% vacancy loss, 2% expenses, $7 per square foot shortfall, and 6.55% cap utilization rate. Arrives a value of 600 and one of the income streams. So that's income stream 1. So income stream 1 is $680,000, and income stream 2 at $15.18 per square foot has another potential rent of $49,669. Again, 5.5% vacancy loss, 2% cap expenses, 5.7% cap rate. So there's two different cap rates here, 6.55 and 5.7. So arrives at for income stream number 2 is $785,000. Comparables we have. So income stream, just to make sure, income stream 2 is a suburban office. Income stream 1 is a medical office. So for the comparables, we have 9 comparables for medical office and 7 comparables for suburban offices. Average price per square foot for medical offices is $20.94 with median of $22 per square foot. For the suburban offices, average price per square foot is $17.26 and median is $16.85. So when we combine both streams together, we have a stabilized cap rate of 6.09 and total estimated market value of $1,465,000. So page 9, again, standard information on cap rates. 10 is standard information of municipal assessment act excerpts. Page 11 is 2017 subject properties income and expense mailer. And it's checked as a net lease. The net lease arrives at $23 per square foot for unit number 1, $23 per square foot for unit number 2, and $12 per square foot for the, I guess, for the unit on the second floor. So with that, yeah, the report further goes into the fresh look section where it describes why City of Winnipeg is now using 2% expenses. So, okay, just take a look. And, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Story, questions?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay. Now, this assessment that the city's suggesting this year would indicate that there's a 24% rise in value, cycle over cycle. Are you aware of that?
Are you comparing the
Last cycle to
last cycle?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see, there's a number here. If I don't, then I'll tell you that, you know.
I think you
I
could probably,
yeah, I
think
did
you
not
probably
bring-
just agree.
I did calculate. So
I didn't do the math, so it's hard to just agree, but I don't have the number for last assessment, so I don't know, I don't have the number, so.
That's fine. Now, would you say an asset such as this would increase by 24% from the last cycle? Does that seem typical, or would you see that and say, oh, maybe I should review this further?
Well, I think if all, like, the assessment has to represent the market values. regardless of percent increase or not. Because looking at it, if the current assessment represents the market value, the percent increase is probably irrelevant. And in my opinion, as I have presented, $23 per square foot net lease at subject property charges for the main floor and $12 per square foot lease at subject property charges for the second floor would then would be more appropriate.
I'm asking if 24% over cycle did not strike you as off. That's just a simple yes
Okay.
or no.
Again, if the assessment supports that 24% is very well warranted, or even 50 or 100.
Now, this is a medical office as well, correct? This is a medical office?
Well, this building has a medical office on the main floor. The regular office would appear to be occupied on the second floor.
Okay. And do you know what the nature of the business is on the second floor?
Some sort of facility. I know that second floor is occupied by some non-profit organization. Again, I just
Okay, that's okay.
I looked at it. Just give me a second. I'll get the name for you. Changes supported living services incorporated occupies the second floor.
Okay, that's fair. So that's the counseling office. It's fair to say this is a medical office. The other properties we've looked at today are also medical offices, and they haven't increased by 24%. That's all I'm saying. Now let's get back to your page one. Actual year built is 76. Effective year built is 1983. That seems like an odd adjustment. Is that precipitated by somebody from the assessment department visiting the site and saying this ought to be 83 as opposed to 76?
Just let me review the record. I'll try to give you the answer. So there was a permit, and in 2015 there was an inspection, and that's where there was a permit to do upgrades.
It's for occupancy, right?
$380,000 worth of upgrades, and therefore it was inspected back in 2015, and that's why effective age was calculated.
All right. Now, there's no basement in this building, is that correct?
I don't have a basement on the record.
Okay, and it says that there's no outdoor parking, but this building clearly has parking. So can you tell me why the city record says that there's no parking?
No, I cannot tell you why city records states no parking.
Okay, that's okay.
That's I'm curious myself, so
That's okay. Now, what's interesting is on page 3, you've got an old photo here, and it's interesting because this, are you aware that this building was almost completely vacant for a number of years? Are you aware of that?
can you tell me when or?
Well, I don't, what I know is that it used to be the Boy Scouts had a retail store on the main floor. It's next to Slice's Pizza, and then across from 7-Eleven. I know this building very well.
Okay, and how relevant is that?
Well, it's
Is
relevant.
it vacant right
Well,
now?
it speaks to risk if this building has the potential to go vacant for a number of years. That's just, that's an issue. This is on a transport node, not necessarily a place where you stop. Okay, now, page 5, I'm gonna suggest that these are all modeled inputs, is that correct?
Yeah, let's see. Yes, they are.
And now we're not far off, we're actually higher on the potential net market income, so I'm not gonna argue rents or comps. But we'll say that some of them are interesting to say the least. But, okay, so your cap rate on the first page here is 6.55, is that correct?
Cap rate for
First income stream.
income stream number 1 is 6.55.
Okay, and for income stream number 2, it's 5.70, is that correct?
5.70, correct.
Okay, now, do you think it's typical that if someone were purchasing or selling this asset, that they would divide the ownership interest between the two income streams and sell them at two different cap rates? Or do you think that what I'll call the main holding, that cap rate would apply to the entire asset.
I would say that there is studies have been done showing the cap rates for offices, showing cap rates for medical offices. That's why on page number 8 there is a stabilized cap rate of 6.09%.
Right, I understand that, but if we zoom out and we get away from modeling for a second and look at how the actual market operates, we're here to figure out the market value. Do you think that a next prudent potential purchaser will look at this asset and capitalize the two different potential income streams with two cap rates, or would they apply one cap rate to the entire asset?
I would assume that they would use one cap rate,
Okay.
but to continue answering that question, that one cap rate wouldn't be tied, wouldn't be one or the other of this, but it would be more in line of the stabilized cap rate that.
You don't think it would be tied to the main holding, what we'll call the main interest in the business?
Well, cap rates by itself is a perception of risk, and every investor has their own perception of risk.
And generally, we would apply that to what I'm gonna call what we call the main holding or the prevalent income stream, which in this case would be the main floor. That's fine. We
Well,
don't
that's,
disagree.
yeah, I mean, we can have opinions,
Okay.
so.
Okay, that's fine. All right, I think that, well, again, and I'll let my argument regarding the broker studies carry through. Not sure this is investment grade, and we'd be looking somewhere between 7 and 7.5, but we have difference of opinions on that. So those are my questions, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Peich.
I have none, thank you.
Mr. Buss?
No questions.
Mr. Story?
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay.
And I think it's basically cap rate,
It's all cap rate, yep.
because your NOIs are pretty close to
I'm a
the
little
same.
higher, I've used the actuals, the
Yep.
cities use models, so
Okay.
we're talking about cap rate today.
Yep.
Okay, the city is suggesting a value of $1,465,000, I'm suggesting a value of $1,093,000 is more appropriate. Now again, this is a corner of Stafford and Lorette. You best describe it as a suburban office. It's constructed in '76, 7,318 gross square feet over 2 floors. And again, the previous tenants were the Scouts Canada Outdoor Store Outlet, as well as a mortgage broker on the second floor. The building has 2 units. Well, it actually has 3 now, with the clinic and the pharmacy, or that operates as one sort of unit. But there is a large common entranceway and stairs, so when you come in, you go left to go to the pharmacy, you go right to go to the clinic, and then you go up the stairs to the not-for-profit. Okay, so the second floor has a leasable area of 3,272 square feet, accessed only by stairs, again, no elevator. Okay, and then again, that's Stafford Street in Lorette, just north of Grant. And we've got 20 outdoor parking stalls, and we are again across the street from a 7-Eleven. But I don't, for the sake of this exercise, I don't believe that that's a negative influence on this property. It's just happens to be a 7-Eleven. Okay.
Whose phone is ringing?
Not mine.
Mine is off.
Oh, wait. I apologize.
That's it.
Shut up.
Sorry, that was mine.
Okay.
Okay, again, so we're talking about cap rates today. And of course, the non-recoverable allowance, again, Altus Group continues to apply an allowance of 7% effective market income. This is a market view of how we ought to approach these assets. We apply a standard allowance of 2% for the structural reserve and a 5% stabilized allowance for non-recoverable expenses that arise from the competent management of the property. Okay. The shortfall is the same as last split cycle, not disputed. Now, we have applied a cap rate of 8% based on some of the site-specific issues facing this property. There was vacant for some time, and a great deal of the space is on the second floor, which is not desirable. So it is our opinion too that the market would not see this asset as having 2 different cap rates. We would use 1 cap rate across the entirety of the assets. So with those points taken into consideration, we do have a higher potential net market income. We're not arguing vacancy. We're saying that the erosion to our income constitutes 7% as opposed to 2%, which is aggressively low. And based on the history of the property, the age, We're saying that an 8% cap rate is appropriate, and so we are coming to an indicated market value at the April 1, 2018 reference date of $1,093,000. And we ask that the board adjust that. So I've got some photos of the interior. You can see it's a pharmacy. That's enclosed at the exterior. Changes is it's a basis people with independent living, from what I understand. They're on the second floor, again, accessible only by stairs and constituting a fairly large part of this property. Likely not maybe functionally obsolescent build, but it was built to be supposed to be a mortgage broker and financial services firm as opposed to a medical office. So that's the reality of the property today. You can see the quality of construction, some parking at the back, parking at the front, and we've included some financials from the owner as well. Barring any questions, that's my presentation. Thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Story. Questions?
Just going back, because cap rate is the only point of contention here. Is that is that correct?
Yeah, well, cap rate and non-recoverable.
Oh yeah, and then recoverables, yeah. So with the cap rates, you are applying 8%. Is that?
8%, yeah.
I was just looking at the table, and this is an office building, so we're looking at the studies done by Collier,
Sure.
CBRE, and so 8 kind of falls outside the range. So I don't.
Well, we adjust for site specific. Now, the other issue, and I alluded to this earlier, the brokers only use investment grade properties. So in layman's terms, they use better properties, properties that have, that are newer, that are not, they don't have functional obsolescence, they don't have histories of vacancy, that generally would perform well in the free and open market. So I'm suggesting that this asset would not be included in all likelihood in a broker's study. Now, further to that, to further complicate things, these broker studies tend to have legal fees and land transfer taxes included in their calculation, which depresses the cap rates down. So if we look at the high end of the cap rates for CBRE, Cushman, and Colliers, at the very lowest, we're going to see a 7.5, and that's before we take into account non-investment grade, history of vacancy, design that's functionally obsolescent, and their calculation including land transfer and legal fees. So 8% seems reasonable from where I stand.
So it is your opinion, right? That 8% is reasonable. There is no, I guess, report or anything like that you can provide to support it, is it?
The cap rate is reasonably subjective, and again, it is the market's appetite for risk and the numerical expression of risk. Now, the other thing is when you've got these 3 tenants, if that tenant on the top floor goes dark, we have a disproportionately high amount of vacancy. The easiest way to look at cap rate is, do all the factors that comprise this property give you a sense of confidence, or do they give you a sense of uneasiness? I will suggest that there are a number of factors related to this property that would give me as an investor a sense of uneasiness.
Okay.
That's my answer. Yeah.
All right. I guess you mentioned a bit of vacancy or anything that do you know when was the building vacant?
I'd have to go back to that. I'm speculating, but I believe between, I think it was around 15, there was a vacancy issue. You can see that it was boarded up too. In your photos, there's a boarded window. Now, we kind of joked a little bit about 7-Eleven, but there is some issue with, I'm not saying, I haven't included this as a site-specific influence negatively, but if you really think about it, having a 24-hour 7-Eleven store does tend to, as a generalization, does tend to some nuisance behavior. So I did remark that there was some graffiti on the back of the building. In your photo, there's broken windows. So I know that, and that tends to be from being vacant for some time.
Yeah, well,
my understanding is it was vacant for a couple of years, but I'd have to check. It may have been more.
well, yeah, like those, like I have 2 photos, and you know the way Google Maps works is you have you change the angle and it changes the whole time frame of the
Well,
pictures.
what's
And
interesting- well-
so the two photos are different. The top photo
There's
does.
a Google time slider, right? So when you go down that street, when you go down Lorette, and you look at it, you're actually probably looking at a photo from 15 or 16 when
Oh,
it's vacant, right?
Yeah, but when you look at it from, is it Lorette? Let's see.
Let's
Yeah,
look at Lorette.
yeah. When you look at it from Lorette, it's different. Yeah.
Well, I didn't
Yeah.
use those older photos, but I did research them, and that's where, and in your photo here, I don't think we have the Scouts Canada banner anymore, but I know that in mine we did, and it was vacant, and then there was no, it was just paper, so,
Okay.
I know there was a vacancy issue in this building.
Well, but currently it's occupied, right?
Yes, somebody purchased it for the utility of running a clinic and pharmacy, yes.
Well,
As
somebody-
is typical of non-investment grade, as we've spoken about
Well,
today.
somebody purchased, and it would appear that they did quite a bit of work to the property.
Well, I'm not sure about the amount of
Yeah.
work, but they've certainly, they've taken it from being a place where there was a retail space where they were selling, tents and water bottles and turned it into a
So,
medical office, but that's, we're valuing, that's captured in the rent, and we're not arguing that today.
look, I mean, perhaps the way I look at it, and you would agree that would the condition of the building affect vacancy?
Would the condition of the building affect vacancy?
Yeah, if the building hasn't been maintained, and then would it attract potential tenants?
Sorry, and as a general question, you're asking me if.
It's a general question.
Does a
or-
well-maintained building have a better?
Well, if the building hasn't been maintained,
Sure.
as the picture would present itself in a form that prior to 2015 renovations, it would appear that building hasn't been maintained, and therefore, would you agree with me that it would affect potential tenants who would wanna occupy the
I'm
property?
not exactly sure what you're driving at, but I think you're saying that when those two tenants vacated, that the building appears to be vacant? I mean, yes, that's true. There's paper on the windows, there's no tenant there. That speaks to the vacancy risk, right? The asset
No,
had to
but
be-
again, like once the
Okay,
renovation.
okay, listen, your vacancy rates are exactly the same, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's.
It's not a general discussion.
Okay, let's move on from it and move on. Then we've discussed cap rates. I believe that the risk is not as high as appellant does. So I'm done with my questions.
All right, I thank you, Mr. Peitsch.
Thank you.
Mr. Buss?
I think they've all been answered.
Okay. Summation, either party?
Well, I guess I'll quickly summarize it, that when I look at the chart studies done by City of Winnipeg, Oilers, or like, you would you would look at it and say, you know what, 8% is too high, and overall rent provided by the city would probably be more appropriate, and in this case, so that's my summation.
Okay, Mr. Story?
Thank you, and I'm going to say that our submission is more representative of the market view of this asset, and that just speaking to the city's cap rate table, I'm going to say that it's aggressively low.
I just want to run one thing past you. The old assessments, I worked at the numbers, 1,181,000. Somewhere around there?
1,178,000.
Okay, okay, good enough. Okay, let's go on to the last one on Lorette, 1218, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so let's see. Subject property, file number 193555, roll number 1201557310, 1218 Lorette Avenue. Property owner is 4892292 Manitoba Limited, 2020 assessment year, with reference date of April 1st, 2018, values the property, has assessed value of $1,127,000. It's a medical office clinic, 1 building, 3 premises, 3 stories, 2006 year building, same year effective age, 9-foot ceiling heights, Class B wood steel frame exterior walls, C1 zoning, 3,361 square feet for land area, 1,788 square feet plan area, same amount of square feet for basement area. Gross floor area 5,640 square feet. Leasable area 4,862 square feet. Land to plan ratio 1.88. Recommendation to maintain the 2020 assessed value at $1,127,000. Okay, so this will give us some pictures of the subject property. So we are on Nathaniel. Basic subject property has a Lorette address, but it's on the corner of Nathaniel and Grant. Nathaniel and Lorette, and 1 block north of Grant. Again, it's a newly built structure, built specifically, purpose-built for to be used for medical clinic. Currently, Center for Natural Medicine. So there's page 3 provides a few more pictures. Okay. So there's the history of sales of the subject property. For the most part, they are. The most recent is 2006. It's a $1 sale with a sworn value of $135,000. I believe those sales were related to prior to all of those sales are related prior to the construction of the building. So page 5, we have $16.43 as a stabilized price per square foot, rent per square foot. Therefore, we have value of $79,881. Go using 5.5% vacancy, 2% expenses, and 6.4% cap rate. We have value of $1,127,000. Page 6 gives us some comparables for office type buildings. Average $20.94, median is $22 per square foot. Okay, page 7 again gives us a summary of income value. 8 cap rates, 9 experts from Municipal Assessment Act. Page 10 gives us income and expense mailer by the property owner, partially owner occupied, gross type of rent, and page 12 forward is a fresh look addenda that gives examples as to the expenses, and why CPU is 2% expenses. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Story.
Thank you. Okay, similar to the last property we looked at, are you aware that this assessment this cycle constitutes a 27% increase from the last cycle?
Let's see.
Just agree.
Just okay.
Thank you.
I'm gonna say that's not typical, you're gonna say it is. So, okay, that's fine. Now, did you review the income and expense mailer on this property?
I've looked at it.
Okay, so it's fair to say that this is a collective of naturopaths who are operating under this one building, correct?
Yes.
And did you notice that they're all on a year-to-year lease?
You know, I don't have the information where.
Probably not leases, it's probably agreements, correct?
Yeah, I don't have information as to the agreements. I know that many of them have started in 2007. That's what I have.
Yeah, and it says year-to-year in every single one of them. So do you think that that would be tantamount to more risk or less risk?
Well, compared to what?
compared to a standard medical building where somebody would sign a lease for a number of years, and that income would be guaranteed. Remember, we talked about cap rates and the durability of the income.
No, I agree with you that if you have, a guaranteed lease in place,
Right.
it would
It's less risky.
constitute less of a risk than year to year, and of course, there is also next step month to month, right?
And they've been year to year since, well, one person has been year to year since 2012, and all the others have been year to year since 2007.
Yes.
Okay, so in terms of a next potential investor, if you were looking at valuing this property, now I mentioned that some of these elements either give you a sense of confidence or a sense of pause. Would this give you a sense of confidence, or would this give you a sense of uneasiness?
It depends,
Depends, okay.
and I'll tell you what it depends on.
Okay, that's fine.
Let me finish it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, what it depends on is, if you are an investor trying to keep current tenants, it would give you a bit of sense of uneasiness, but if you are an investor trying, and those type of buildings typically are being purchased for, I guess, use of personal, a higher number of those buildings are being purchased to be used for the purpose of the owner, right? So if the owner is a medical clinic, they would look at it a bit differently than.
Sure, okay, so it's partially owner occupied, but he does have 7 tenants in there, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Now, are you familiar with the principle of regression? Regression, do you think that this is an architecturally conforming building, or would it be atypical objectively?
Conforming to what?
Its surroundings, the neighborhood. It's on a residential street.
It is on a residential street, it is, I would say, I'll put it this way. It's a borderline non-conforming, let's put it that way. It is in the area on the residential streets. I believe this parcel was a residential house before it was built. So with that, it is non-conforming. It is conforming in the fact that it is within closer scope to the commercial area, being closer to Grand,
It's fine.
and it's specifically built for that purpose.
But we can agree that it's atypical. It's not a typical building. It's odd, right?
No, there I wouldn't agree with you.
Okay, have you visited it?
No, I have not.
Okay, it's fine. All right, well, you've looked at photos though?
Yes.
Okay, have you looked at more photos than the ones you've included here?
So, yeah. No, that's basically all I have there.
And it's 3 floors, correct?
Yes.
And the access to the 3rd floor is only by stairs. There's a staircase on the back side of the building to go up to the 3rd floor, and there's also stairs in the inside of the building. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, and just as a general question, do you think a great deal of stairs in a medical office is a benefit in this market?
Again, without looking at the bigger picture, I cannot answer the question whether it's a benefit or not, but it does create a sense of a separate office altogether where clients are not being
Those are my questions. Thanks.
clustered together.
Thank you, Mr. Peich.
Have that, please.
Mr. Buss?
Are some of the, on page, page 5, some of those rents, are they below grade? I see by the pictures that there's some windows in the basement level. Are those all above grade rents or below?
Okay,
Some below.
so what we have here is we have a standard office. So it would appear to me that those are above grade because basement typically have their own definition of tenant class being in the basement. So three tenant classes here would appear to be above grade.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Story.
All right. Okay.
Again,
We're within
non-recoverable
$2 and-
cap rate.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
within $2 of potential net market income, which is rare to see, but here we are. Okay, so the subject property is a 3-story wood frame structure. It's on the southwest corner of Lorette and Nathaniel Street. It's used as an office building. If you go in the Grant Park Mall and you look down the street, you can sort of see it. You've probably seen it before. So we do have a basement. Now, there's a question about the basement. The basement is shared space between the tenants of the building. There's no additional rent applied to it. It's just, they all sort of, they use it. Now, this building was originally constructed in 2006. The department is calling it a medical office building, which we're not contending. And we have a reported rentable area of 4,862 square feet. Again, there are no formal leases in the property, with each tenant operating on a year-to-year basis, generally from 2007 to present. And it's being used by a group of naturopathic doctors. The subject site is rectangular in shape, and the total site size, according to the City of Winnipeg records, is approximately 3,362 square feet, with C1 commercial zoning. We've got 3 stalls for on-site parking, and we are, again, in a residential area, and I will mention that the city's increased the assessment on this property by 27% over the last cycle, which is not supported by the economic reality of this property. Okay, now, we agreed not to touch on the rents. We're within a couple dollars, so that's fine. The vacancy allowance is not in dispute. We're both at 5.5%. It's fine. Now, we do continue to apply an allowance of 7% as an erosion to the effective market rent, 2% for the structural reserve, 5% for the non-recoverable expenses. The shortfall is also not disputed. So we've applied a cap rate of 8% based on the site-specific issues facing this property. Now, again, this is another property where we've, I believe we've settled it in the last 2 cycles, because it is atypical, and it doesn't seem to be, it doesn't fit within the model, and the city has traditionally understood that. We've come to terms, and in both 16 and 18, we've used a rate of 8%. Again, as I've said.
Cap rate, you mean?
Cap rate, yeah, cap
Okay.
rate, yeah, sorry. Cap rate of 8%, so I will continue to use the cap rate of 8% in this cycle, as, again, the economic reality of this asset has not changed. In fact, one might say it's become more risky. We have no formal leases in this building. It's very likely to be difficult to lease. It's basically for naturopathic doctors, so we've generally agreed that 8% is appropriate. So with all those factors taken together, we come to an indicated market value of $854,000 for this cycle, and we respectfully submit that the board amend this assessment to $854,000. I have some photos for you. This is just from the city's site. You can see this is it's actually smaller than average as a residential house. It's right on the corner. We also have some photos of the front. I believe the assessor has this in his brief. But what's really interesting, I alluded to this earlier, there's a great deal of stairs here. This is the back parking lot with 4 parking stalls. I suggest that this is not a benefit for a medical clinic to have 2, 3 flights of stairs, 2.5 flights of stairs. We've got photos of the interior. You can see the reception desk. Standard interior of one of the doctor's offices. And then this is the lobby, and again, just based on how this structure is built, we've got a pretty daunting staircase for people who potentially have mobility issues or whatnot. So we've got a lot of access issues that are not typical of medical offices, and again, that's captured in the 8% cap we've applied. And another shot of the lobby. Okay. And barring questions, that's my presentation. Thank you.
I thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Questions of the applicant?
Well, I guess we've been over the same questions over and over. It's cap rate and then 7% versus 2%, so I don't have any other questions.
Okay, I thank you. Mr. Peitsch?
I have no questions, thanks.
Mr. Buss?
The leasing, could that be the owner's choice, where everybody is on a 1-year lease?
I would suspect not. I would not think
Seems
so.
odd to me that all of a sudden he's got 4 tenants who are all demanding just to have 1-year leases.
Well, I mean, maybe that's what he has to offer to get people in the building, is a I don't know. I mean, it's clearly in the owner's interest to have, when we talk about cap rate, and we talk about the durability and the appreciation of income moving forward, not having a lease in place from year to year, and then presumably everyone's lease coming up at the same time, that doesn't put an owner in a very good position from my perspective. So I don't think that's his choice.
Do you think this is a good location for this
Yeah,
building?
I think it's a good location in general. I think that being in a residential area like this is not particularly great. I think it might be better to be in a more standard space in Grand Park, but I mean, based on the nature of the business, perhaps it has some allure to the clientele, I don't know, but I would suggest that the structure is not ideal for a medical office.
Looks nice with pictures, big windows. We heard stories here earlier today about how this building has barely no windows, and
Right.
other
It does
buildings
have
had to
windows.
come in from the back lane.
But if I have a sore leg and I have to go to the third floor, it's not a great,
But this for naturopaths, those people who go in there are healthy.
fair enough. But it would limit the type of tenant that you could have in the future, right? You could never have a government tenant with that sort of access issue. So I hear what you're saying, but I think that the having stairs only to the third floor is not a positive.
Thank you. That's all my
Thank you.
questions.
Either party wants summation?
Well, just quick summation that I would ask the board to, it's been discussed over and over that expense percentages and cap rates, so the information is there. I ask the board to look at the city side of it, and that's all I have. Thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Story.
Yes, gentlemen, I thank you for your time today, listening to our issues. And I will submit that I believe that our position is more representative of a market view of these subject properties. We're here today for the purposes of determining a fair market value. I think that using actuals as opposed to modeling is more appropriate, and I think we've made a pretty solid case on these properties, and I thank you for considering our position.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Story, and thank you for your presentations and results very soon. So.